Good evening. Is it 7? It's 7 by my time. Okay. It is just 7 p.m. and I'd like to call the first city council meeting of 2024 to order. And with that, I'm going to take a roll call by visual check. We are here in person, 4 of us, and Council Member Kwok is participating remotely due to a Paige's illness, so he is able to do so, but we are glad to have him participate. So just by roll call, I will call Councilmember Candell. I'm here. Councilmember Anduri. Here. Councilmember Geringer. Here. And Vice Mayor Kwok.
Present.
Thank you.
Remotely.
Yeah. I'd like to call for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'd like to make a change to the agenda. I'd like to pull up item 11A, the recognizing the Acalanes High School football team. We want to move you up in our schedule. And so we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance and the land acknowledgement statement, and we'll go directly to you before public comment.
Yes, all in favor of changing the, adopting the agenda with that?
I'll second, but aye.
Oh, thank you. It's unanimous. We will do so. With that, we will move to the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there anyone in the football team that want to take the lead on the Pledge of Allegiance? Don't want to put anybody on the spot? Paul? Yeah. Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, get on the mic.
Thank you, Paul.
Just press, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very nice. Thank you for that. Okay. I would like to proclaim our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Lafayette is part of the unceded ancestral homeland of the Bay Miwok people. The Bay Miwok and neighboring Ohlone people have lived in and moved to this place for thousands of years. They've stewarded and shaped this land for hundreds of generations. We express our appreciation and gratitude for this profound legacy, which enhances and contributes to our lives to this day. We will strive to honor this land and strengthen our ties with Indigenous communities that continue to live and work in our East Bay region as our neighbors and community members. We acknowledge and honor them and their ancestors, elders, and next 7 generations. All right, and we will move on to 11A presentation. So I want to let you know how thrilling it is to kick off the year with this presentation to you guys. We are so very proud of you and we celebrate your achievements on the field as well as off. I hear that your coach has said that your academic achievements are also doing very well. So that's really wonderful. And Coach Burnside, you have also been recognized as Coach of the Year by the Bay Area News Group. So these are all fantastic things that we celebrate and recognize. So I have here a proclamation that I'd like to read. Okay, whereas in 2023, the Acalanes High School varsity football team won the California Interscholastic Federation, CIF, Division IV North Coast Sectionals, and whereas the team also won the NorCal Division III AA Regional Football Championship, thereby earning a spot in the Division III AA State Championship game, and whereas in Southern California on December 9th, 2023, the team won their game against the Birmingham Patriots from Lake Balboa and took home the state championship title. And whereas this is the first time in Acalanes High School's history, the football team has won the Division IV North Coast Sectionals, the NorCal Division III AA Regional Championship, and the Division III AA State Championship titles, and whereas the varsity team is led by head coach Floyd Burnside. Now, therefore, be it resolved that on behalf of the Lafayette City Council, it is my pleasure and honor to congratulate the 2023 Acalanes High School varsity football team and coaching staff on winning the 2023 Division III AA State Championship. Thank Yes. Coach Burnside, I'd love to present this to you. Oh, pardon? Yes, yes. There it is. Yes. Congratulations. Yes. That is very exciting.
See when we get front center, please.
I'll get out of here. I'm railing every time I'm.
Let's dedicate the season.
That is?
That's good.
We good?
Thank you for being here. We just wanted to see if there's public comment and also welcome Coach Burnside if you'd like to say anything. We'd love to hear it in a more public venue. You're sharing some wonderful stories with me. I'd love to share that.
I just think it's great that these young men won the state title first time in school history. And I think it's not only great for our football players, which are excited, our coaching staff, and of course, Acalanes High School, but I think for the whole community of Lafayette. From what I understand, there was a lot of people watching the game on TV, and it was a very exciting game. And I've gotten so many phone calls, emails, and texts from all over the country that people were watching our game. And I was in Harris last week for New Year's, and I'm walking through the casino there on the way to go to dinner. And these two guys stopped me because I had my Acalanes hat on. And they go, "Is that Acalanes in Lafayette?" And I went, "Yeah." And they go, "Did you know they won the state title?" I went, "Yeah." I went, "Yeah, I heard that." And they said they were from Southern California, but they live in Lafayette and they followed the football team and all. So it was really nice. My wife Carolyn went on and told them that I was a head coach, and they go, "Oh, he's a legend," which means I'm old. So, but anyway, I'm so proud of this football team. They came together and had just such a great season. Started off 0-3, but came back and played really well. And then in the 3 championship games, I don't think any team could play any better than what we played. It was a tribute to these guys to pull together, stick together, and end up going all the way and winning the state title. So I want to thank the city of Lafayette, the city council, for having us down here tonight and recognizing their achievements, which is awesome. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Coach. You know, is there any other public comment? Okay, just you guys are champions and you made history. So thank you. It's a wonderful thing to celebrate. We're very proud of you. All right, thank you. So we will move. Yeah, thank you. That's a good suggestion. We will move on to public comments, and I'd like to just make a comment before that, since we're kicking off the year. We continue to provide a teleconference option to the public as a courtesy, subject to certain protocols, including the following directive. All public comments made during our public comments agenda item at the beginning of this meeting must be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. All public comments under other agenda items must relate to that agenda item. If this directive is ignored, following a warning by myself, the city clerk, or the city attorney, the city clerk will mute the speaker. As we now open public comment on items not on the agenda, I want everyone to be aware that we have an obligation under the First Amendment and the Brown Act to allow speakers to make their comments even if they are not compatible with our community values. While the council must hear them out, if they are within the city's subject matter jurisdiction, anyone in the room should feel free to step outside, and anyone at home should feel free to mute your audio. And if we get a large number of public speakers, we reserve the right to move that to the remaining at the end of the meeting. And finally, public comments are 3 minutes. So with that, are there any public comments?
Mayor Dawson, I have one speaker slip from Ditto Clark here in the community hall. And if anyone in our virtual audience would like to make a comment, please raise your hand.
Thank you. Welcome, Ditto.
Thank you. I am Ditto Clark. I've had a Lafayette address for the last 70 years, but now I have a new address at 1922 Tice Valley Boulevard, number 2002, Walnut Creek. When I heard that Teresa Geringer is retiring, I immediately thought that I wanted to come and thank her for her service. And I want to thank all of you for your service. Now, I have 3 purposes. 1, thank you, Teresa Geringer. I think that you are awesome and that you have made great contributions to the community. 2, thank you, all other council members and city staff. I have served on 3 Lafayette City commissions, so I have some appreciation of your work. 3, I will be on your ballot next month if you are a registered Democrat in County Supervisor District 2. I'm running for re-election to the Contra Costa County Democratic Central Committee. I am the senior elected member since the year 2000, and my priorities are the Democratic Party platform and the small d democratic values of inclusion, respect for others, and procedural due process. Please vote for me. Thank you very much. Best wishes for a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Any speakers?
No additional speakers, Mayor Dawson?
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And we will move on to the city manager's update. No?
I am just pretending like I'm Narup. I did not prepare city manager's update. I believe that Yeah, we'll get to the things that are important in this, in all due time.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we will move on, since we did the Akalani's football presentation, to the audit presentation. Yeah, almost as exciting as right.
I know. Everyone's been holding their breath for it. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here this evening to present to you the fiscal year 23 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. This is the fourth audit prepared for us by Badawi and Associates. You may recall that they have a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options to extend, so there's 1 year remaining on their contract. The Finance Subcommittee met to discuss the draft report on December 19th of 2023, and their comments and feedback have been incorporated into the final report. The city, Badawi and Associates has issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the city's financial statements, and the city continues to be in a strong financial position. All of the city's financial highlights can be found in the management's discussion and analysis, which starts on page 5 of the audit report. At this time, I just wanted to highlight some of the most significant items that occurred in the city's finances for fiscal year 23. The first is the ARPA funds. The city received the second tranche of ARPA funds in fiscal year 23 in the amount of $3.186 million. Of the second and first tranches, $1.3 million was spent in fiscal year 23. And at the end of the year, the city still has a balance of $480,000 from tranche 1 and $2.7 million from tranche 2. Another significant item was the purchase of 2 properties by the city in fiscal year 23. These would be the police department offices at 3471 Mount Diablo Boulevard, and as well as the property at 986 and 990 Moraga Road. The last significant item I wanted to mention tonight was the implementation of Governmental Accounting Standards Board Standard Number 87, which addresses long-term lease commitments, which are now to be included on the financials. So you'll see some more significant changes on the assets and the liability side of the city's finances. One is a right of use asset. It represents the lease of the city offices at Desco Plaza. Since we are in a 7-year agreement with the owners of that property, we have an asset that we are entitled to use for 7 years. And then on the liability side, we have a lease liability of $2.5 million. This report has been submitted for the annual financial reporting award that we usually get. So I'm looking forward to reporting back to you in a couple months on that. Our audit partner was scheduled to be traveling today, so he's unavailable, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions from council? No, thank you for that report and that work.
Yeah.
Is there public comment on the financial audit?
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips and I see no hands raised in our virtual audience.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to the consent calendar, agenda item 12. Are there any items that council wishes to pull, public?
Oh, sorry. I would like to pull it is 12B, Resolution 2024-02.
Okay, thank you. Any other edits to the consent calendar? And if not, would someone make a motion?
I'd be happy to move the consent calendar with the exception of 12B.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Geringer, seconded by Councilmember Candell. Does the public want to pull any other item off the consent calendar?
I have no requests in writing here from persons in the community hall, and I see no hands raised. Mayor
Okay.
Dawson.
Thank you. And we did note that that was in a public comment, so thank you for removing that for discussion later. All right, with that, I will do, actually all in favor of adopting the consent calendar with exception of item 12B.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. Okay, it's an unanimous consent calendar. It's passed with exception of item B, 12B. And with that, we are quickly moving along to item 13, old business, which is Matt Luttrop, the East Side Pleasant Hill Road Pathway and Pleasant Hill Corridor Study Update.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm back. So at your October 10th council meeting, the city council directed staff to reach out to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority and determine the current scope of work and timeline for completion of the corridor study on Pleasant Hill Road. Staff was also directed to request that CCTA include bike and pedestrian improvements in this study. Sub-regional corridor management plans have been proposed for many of the routes of regional significance in La Mirinda, including Pleasant Hill Road, as part of the 2023 update to the La Mirinda Action Plan and the CCTA. And CCTA would be the lead agency for development of the corridor study. More specifically, Roadways 15, action in the March 23 version of the La Mirinda Action Plan states, develop sub-regional corridor management plans for Moraga Road, Moraga Way, Camino Pablo, San Pablo Dam Road, and Pleasant Hill Road to provide adequate roadway capacity for local and sub-regional travel, while also including both public and active transportation modes and non-modal transportation issues such as equity, climate change, safety, and technology. Plans on evacuation routes should also be addressed, also address long-term emergency evacuation. Subsequent to the October 10th meeting, Patrick Goyer, our Transportation and Circulation Program Manager, spoke with Matt Kelly from CCTA and was informed that the scope of the study had not yet been developed and that funding and timeline for the study had not been allocated or determined. Thus, staff is not able to provide any definitive information about potential future Pleasant Hill Road corridor management plans at this time. So that brings us back to where we were at the last meeting. With regard to studies and engineering work for an East Side pathway project. So all of the options and costs that were presented at the last council meeting are still in play. I did update one of those costs because previously the design cost that I had in there of $110,000 did not include the design work that would be necessary to install signals at the on and off ramps. So I talked to the consultant and she told me that if we include that work in it, the design cost could be around $350,000. And part of that is because it's fairly unknown what reconfiguration of the ramps may be required by Caltrans as part of putting in signals. So to recap the other costs, strip maps for the east side or the west side or both, each one of those would cost $17,000. So that's kind of a very schematic sketch of what the project would be. Then to do concept drawings for the ramps on the east side would be about $3,500. Basic traffic analysis of the signalized ramps would be approximately $4,500. And the cost to develop a design concept for the signalized ramps would be an additional $10,000. And then to develop a full traffic study, which would be required by Caltrans if we were going to pursue traffic signals at their ramps, would cost approximately $30,000. So it's kind of a laundry list of costs there. The stated goal of the multi-user pathway in the corridor has been to provide a low-stress facility that eliminates the need for cyclists and pedestrians to cross the uncontrolled intersections with the freeway on and off ramps. As such, staff does not recommend pursuing an option without traffic signals on the east side, as it doesn't meet that stated goal. However, it should be noted that it is likely that the impacts from the addition of traffic signals at the on and off ramps will significantly impact both Highway 24 and Pleasant Hill Road traffic congestion and delay. It is in the unlikely event that Caltrans allows for this impact, they may require additional mitigation measures to be incorporated into the project that can't be foreseen at this time. If the City Council wishes to explore the scope of the East Side pathway and possible impacts as an alternative to constructing the center median pathway, staff would recommend that the City Council pursue items 1, 4, and 5, which are the strip map with a design concept for signalized ramps and a basic traffic analysis of signalized ramps. So that would be an estimated cost of $31,500. Once this is done, a public meeting can be held to discuss the design option and potential impacts on traffic. If this option continues to be viable, item 6, a full traffic study for an estimated cost of $30,000 can be implemented to develop a submittal for Caltrans review. Assuming Caltrans is willing to review a submittal at less than 100%, because traditionally they want to see 100% plans ready to build before they review things. And they find the impacts to be acceptable, the full design could then be pursued at a cost of approximately $350,000. It should be noted that these options are currently unfunded. If the City Council wishes to further explore the scope of it should be East Side pathway and its possible impacts, the cost would that is correct. If we want to look at the West Side pathway option, it would likely be similar cost to the East Side pathway option. Caltrans is continuing to work on the installation of their RRFBs, which are the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the blinky crosswalk signs at the on and off ramps within the city of Lafayette. They're also doing some extra street lights to illuminate these crossings. And I believe they are planning on finishing that up in the next couple of months is the last I heard. They're also putting in some new pedestrian push buttons at Mount Diablo and at Old Tunnel Road, kind of those intersections to bring those up to current ADA compliance. So those are the alternatives. And what I'm seeking for is for you to ask questions and direct me as to how you wish me to proceed.
Mayor Dawson, before we continue on with this item, if we might, I apologize, we needed to take a roll call vote on that last consent calendar item.
Oh, I apologize.
No, it's my fault. I should have flagged it earlier. Although it was a unanimous vote, if we wouldn't mind just taking a roll call vote on that item, and then we can get back to this item.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. We'll veer off here. So I will do a roll call vote for adoption of the consent calendar with the exception of 12B. Councilmember Anduri,
Aye.
Councilmember Candell,
Aye.
Councilmember Geringer,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Kwok.
Aye.
And I am an aye. The consent calendar is adopted unanimously, the exception of 12B. Okay, thank you, Matt. And thank you also for this follow-up. I know you've been going back to the many, many parties that we asked you to go to. Are there questions for Matt?
Yeah. Unless somebody wants to jump in first. I should have a couple of questions, but on the funding, so you mentioned that there's currently, first of all, the decision ahead of us tonight is whether to and how deep to go into additional studies of the East Side and the West Side, and not specifically the center median, because that design work is going forward. But you noted that there is currently, as we're making this decision, no funding for any additional studies. So if we decide as we break these things up that we want to do it all, do some of it, where would our funding sources, where would we look for that funding source?
That is the big question. Engineering doesn't have any funding sources for this, so
Tracy.
it's a shame Jennifer left. She
Yeah.
took all the money with her.
I bet Tracy can.
So you'll have an opportunity to look at your budget. It would have to come out of general funds. And so you can, I know you've had hopefully a chance to look at those to see where we are with that. But yeah, I don't think there's any other small.
And then I have a question that, I may have others after, but, the Caltrans work that's being done right now in terms of the, 18 RRFBs, I'm not good at acronyms, and the other illumination of crosswalks, when were studies done on those? I know I want to thank you and Stella for getting all of those plans to us, but you know, we hear and we've been looking at studying this corridor, this piece of it. Did we see studies? Did we weigh in? This happened long before most of us were on the council, or I guess where were the traffic studies and things like that for what they did?
That is a very good question. I asked Caltrans that very question because Stella had a very good comment on the project, which was they hadn't done anything to address the free rights on Mount Diablo. So I asked Caltrans, what's up? And they said they're not dangerous. Our studies show that they're safe. There have been no accidents. It's fine. So I asked them, could you please provide me with the studies or the memorandums or whatever you have that show me how you came to these conclusions? And they said no. So I don't know if that means that they didn't do any studies or if they simply don't want to provide them. So short answer is I have no idea what studies they've done. This project started, I think the first time I saw the plans were 2 years ago. And they implemented some of my comments, but not all of them.
So one more question related to that, and then I'll let others, I think we'll probably have some similar questions, but so with that, in terms of looking at, we weren't intimately involved in looking at why they would choose those particular solutions or those particular infrastructure enhancements in terms of safety and all of that. So there hasn't been a direct correlation sort of study related to the center median or the way that with the terraces and that slip lane and any of that, they weren't directly kind of connected.
Not at all, because
Okay.
they're doing a lot of intersections in Contra
Throughout the
Costa. So
county.
they're also doing Acalanes Road
Mhm.
is also getting these flashing beacons. So it had nothing to do with center median, terraces, any of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nduri?
And just to follow up, do we have any better idea of when they'll finish those improvements?
My understanding is in the next couple of months, but I don't really know. I haven't seen anybody out there in a while, so that maybe they're waiting for material to show up. Because all of the electrical work's in, the pedestrian push buttons have been put in for the stuff at Mount Diablo. So I think they're just waiting to get the equipment to put it up.
Okay, thank you. And then in on page 2 of your report, the staff report, it says the stated goal of a multi-user pathway in this corridor is to provide a low-stress facility that eliminates the need for cyclists and pedestrians to cross the uncontrolled intersection with the freeway on and off ramps. Now, that's the goal of that particular project, correct?
Correct.
So would you, well, I'm looking at the next sentence, as such, staff does not recommend pursuing an option without traffic signals that does not meet this stated goal. But the goal is for the center median, not for any other project that may be. I mean,
Sort of the idea behind why the center median was approved by the council and we pursued this is because it was going to move people away from that conflict.
Yeah, well, just
So yes, it
technic-
is, yes, it is specific to that project.
It's just technically, the council approved applying for funding to design a project that would avoid those on-ramps,
Yes,
as
you are
opposed to saying we need something that avoids those on-ramps. I just want to make sure that that's clear. And then I don't know how to ask this in a question. I need to ask the city attorney. There's a very interesting exchange around December 6th with Matt, Stella, Councilmember Candell. I found very illuminating in terms of the Pleasant Hill, the median. And I don't know if it's okay to talk about that at this meeting and what,
It is in the packet, but we are limited to the East Side Pleasant Hill Road Pathway and Pleasant Hill Corridor Study. So I need to look back at the exact correspondence to see if it fits within that description.
okay, well, I'll come back to this in comments, then I won't ask a question. Thank you.
Councilman Kendall? Yeah, thanks. Lots of questions. Interesting that we don't get any of the studies and everything back from Caltrans, of course not. And I too was concerned with what you said, the stated goal of a multi-use pathway in this corridor is to provide a low-stress facility that eliminates the need for cyclists to cross those uncontrolled intersections. They are uncontrolled, but with the RRFBs, and I looked up some Department of Transportation studies on RFBs. In one case, they say that this Department of Transportation, they improve the rate at which drivers yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk from 10 to 20% to 70 to 85%. And in other cases, they say it even goes up to like 95% of drivers, looking at them and yielding. And so I too was struggling to say that how this is not, I know it's an uncontrolled, but where does that, with an RFE, where does that land us, right?
It would be, the RRFBs are a significant improvement over the existing.
Mhm.
No two ways about it.
Great, okay.
But it's still technically an uncontrolled intersection. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally from my walking to the BART station from city offices. We have our RFBs on Happy Valley Road, and I would say that only about 50% of the time do people stop when I'm trying to cross that street. It usually takes a couple of people going past.
Different than these, right?
Oh, it's very different.
Very different because it's so
Yeah.
wide, right? I've done that same
Yeah.
cross and I'm like, it's so wide.
Well, one I'm doing is short. It's across Happy Valley. That's a very.
Oh, that
narrow
one. Okay, I was thinking the one that was going across Deer Hill. I'm sorry.
That one has iffy compliance too. So I
Exactly.
think you really don't know what the compliance is going to be with an RRFB until you install it, really.
Right. Okay.
So my hope is that the ones at the on and off ramps will have a very high rate of compliance.
Are we going to study that? I know Caltrans didn't, but is there a thought that we would at least, is there any way, it's not our jurisdiction, I guess, is there any way for us to even study that?
Not formally.
Not formally,
I think
okay.
informally, we certainly can spend some time going out there when school lets out
Okay.
and there are kids walking. That's probably the highest likelihood of time of finding people crossing it. Or when the cross-country team runs through it, that would be a good time too.
Okay.
And just do a casual observation as to what the compliance rate is.
Okay. So back to the RRFBs. And it's because one of the, a couple of these dollar things are big, right? And one of them relates to the traffic study. And I know I was in that meeting with Caltrans, right? But I really struggle to understand functionally how an RRFB being there, how that's really any different than a street light being there in terms of functionality, right? And so they're both on demand. You still have to wait for the cars to stop. Person goes across, it's going to be short. They go across and then traffic goes again. That's the same as a stop light. And so is there a way that we could push this back onto Caltrans saying, well, do we really need to do a traffic study? Because basically all we have these now and they're doing literally the exact same thing. And you guys said it was okay because you installed it, right? You obviously know there's a traffic impact from the RFBs. There will be, but why make us justify something different from a stop light to that? And why would they make us do that?
But the short answer is because it's Caltrans. But there is a difference between a stoplight and RRFBs.
Okay, tell me.
As soon as a person has cleared the crosswalk with an RRFB, you can go.
Right.
With a stoplight, you can't. You've got to wait till it cycles back to green. And you also have a
It'll be
yellow light.
short. Like the traffic light will be short, the same as long duration of the RFB, right?
No, because the amount of time that cars are required to either through the yellow cycle, prepare to stop, the red cycle, stay stopped, and then they can go, is going to be longer than with an RRFB. Because if one person pushes the button and they cross the street and it's still happily flashing away, the car can go because it's just a yellow light. With a traffic signal, if it's just one person and they run across the road because they're catching up to the cross-country team, person still has to sit there for the full cycle of the red light. I don't know what the minimum red time that
Okay.
Caltrans will accept is.
And that's because we're changing the configuration because it's a straight and it's not a right turn, right? Otherwise they get a right turn on red, but we're not
Except it's not a-
configuration that like.
It's not a right
it's
turn on
straight.
red situation.
Right.
It's a
It's a
through
straight.
situation. So you're going to get, I would guess, at least 15 seconds of wait time with the red, maybe even longer, because you got to get all the pedestrians across. And they're going to assume when you're setting the red time, it's not someone on a cross-country team, it's someone in a wheelchair is what they're going to assume for their red times or something along those lines. So you will be held up for a little longer.
Okay, so then that leads me into the next question of, I know you feel it's really, really important for us to reconfigure the lanes to make it, to do this, right? Can we get, and I'm assuming we're talking about a class 4 bike lane, just like the middle one, right?
Yeah, class
Right.
one.
Class 1, sorry. Class 1, just like the middle. So if we can fit one in the middle, we can fit one on the side.
Yep.
So is there a way for us, is it feasible for us to do the class 1 bikeway into the existing RRFB intersections and be able to continue just between those, but keep the RRFB intersections?
If I understand your question correctly, can we put in a class 1 facility and not have to completely reinvent
Exactly.
those crossings?
Yeah. That is my big question.
I think if we do need to move things a little bit, it wouldn't be particularly expensive because you don't have the issue of having to get power, get the equipment.
Right.
You just would be moving it over and maybe rewiring it. So short answer is you can do that without redoing the RFBs.
And so we might be able to get, that's like a smaller step for the city, a smaller grant overall by like probably a lot. And you think that we would still qualify. And I know these would be quote unquote uncontrolled, but it's Caltrans approved RFBs. They installed them. We're taking advantage of this wonderful thing that they gave us and still get the class 1 funding.
I don't know. I don't write grants.
Right.
It's possible.
But there's not a saying thing that says, no, you can't, right? It's like we can, it's not out of the question at least.
Nothing's out of the question.
Okay.
It just is how competitive you'll be in the grant.
Right. Yep. Yeah, sure.
Follow-up question to that. alternative one is that $17,000 study. Could they, in that $17,000 study, take into consideration the new improved RFVBs and the impact it's having? I noticed they're supposed to give pros and cons of using the east side. I assume they would take into account this new improvement, right? And provide their view on what impact it would have on a class one walkway to narrow down to a.
Yes,
Existing
their analysis would include whatever the existing conditions are now.
Okay, or will be in a couple months.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
but just to be clear, the $17,000 is a strip map and listing of pros and cons. It's not so much I don't know if I want to call it a study, because it doesn't do more traffic counts or things like that. It just looks at the layouts.
Vice Mayor Quack, sorry, you go ahead.
Thanks. I have a question regarding on the first page incoming, there's a discussion about our October 10th meeting and the request that we made as a council to explore what CCTA was planning for this intersection area, which is, has a lot of challenges to it. And we talked about how as a route of regional significance, there was really many, many issues that need to be addressed, of which the center median lane or the east were only addressing partial issues of rider safety, important ones, but not some of the other issues about congestion at key hours there. And so my interest at least in learning what the overall plan was from a higher level entity that has more funding than we do, is what is a holistic approach to try to address multiple issues and from a design point of view and a funding point of view. And is that something what's the timing of that? Short, medium, really long term? And in reading this paragraph, the answer was, we don't know, right? It looks like we asked the question of when a study would be done or what would the timing, and it had not been determined. And therefore, of course, staff cannot come to today's meeting with a definitive answer. But that being said, is there an indication if we don't, is it something that we could expect that would be looked at within 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? Is there any indication of whether this is on a priority list to be looked at, the more holistic resolution at a wider level? And maybe I would also invite my fellow council members who are, who engage with that to see if they have any insights into the timing. I'm sort of wondering, the response I'm reading here is like, okay, nothing might happen in early 2024, but how about just looking out in a 3 to 5 year time frame? Is there any indication whether this matter of a more holistic design and improvement could be commenced in 3 to 5 years? Thank you.
Good question. So I did talk to Patrick this afternoon, and he had recently talked to CCTA, and they said that their first priority is going to be the countywide evacuation plan. That's their near-term priority. I don't know what other not near-term priorities they have other than this corridor study. So I don't know how CCTA functions and how fast they go through their wish list, but I would be surprised if they were addressing this corridor study within 2 years. I would think it would be longer than that, because I imagine the evacuation plan is going to take a significant amount of effort and expenses.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Oh, I was just going to add, and I don't know if Mike, through, don't want to put Mike Moran on the spot, but I did know that the priority on the evacuation, I don't know what that timing is on the corridor study. And I know Stella and I were talking about this today, about that the Pleasant Hill Road corridor study, the Camino Diablo, the others that are mentioned here for the La Miranda area have been in our local area plan for a while. And so while I don't know the exact timing, Vice Mayor Kwok, sorry, I do think that it's out farther, you know, in that 3 to 5 year probably cycle, but that members, whoever the representatives are to the LMP, I'm terrible at these, to our local, our La Miranda group, and also our staff members through TAC can continue as we have those discussions to place them as a priority, that these are priorities that we have for our La Miranda area. And as they're moving forward with their planning at the CCTA Authority Board level, those would rise up from our local group up to SWAT, our Southwest Area Transportation Group, and then to the board. And so I think continuing, it's not an immediate solution, but I don't think when we went back, we thought that I didn't think that it would be something that was going to happen before we looked at these specific, the center path and the East Side study, but and Mike's nodding that we can continue to try and lift that up as a priority, as will our neighbors in all of the other communities throughout Contra Costa will be bringing their priorities as well. But the part of the CCTA plan added this time that focus on working on regional solutions, not just working in our sort of silos, if you will. And so continuing to work and figure out where staff for our different, for SWAT, for TransCirc, Transplan can work together to raise up those solutions that are part of a regional solution, which is what you're talking about in that kind of holistic way. And I won't go into Councilmember Anduri's whole part about also wanting trails, and there are a lot of communities in the county who also want that. And I know CCTA is looking at their bike plans just as we are. So anyway, not a straight answer other than we are not the answer you want, other than we can keep lifting that up as a priority for us.
Thank you, Councilmember Geringer. So when I'm hearing it, it sounds like it's at least a 3 to 5 lookout, if that. So my questions are covered by my astute peers here. But is there any other questions? Okay, can we call for public comment now?
Yes, Mayor Dawson, we're taking public comments on items 13A, and I have 2 speaker slips for persons in the community hall. Our first speaker is Janet Thomas, followed by Stella Witherspoon.
Good evening, Annette. I'm Janet Thomas, live at 3206 Palomares in the Acalanes Avenue area. Right off of
Could you
Pleasant
hit
Hill
your
Road.
mic button? Oh,
I think it was on. I'll just
okay,
get closer. This has been an interesting discussion, and a lot of the questions that I had have been addressed. My feeling is these incredible flashing beacons are going up at a cost of what I've heard, hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I'm, I've heard of an estimate of more than that. Okay. I am very concerned about the safety of the Pleasant Hill pathway and corridor. And I would love to see a wider pathway for bikers and for pedestrians. I think it should be looked at as part of the corridor. I know in our discussions over the months, there's been a lot of talk about really wanting to have a path from the trail all the way to Release. I personally feel the east side of Pleasant Hill Road is where to look for that, all the way to Release Valley, crossing at Quant. There's plenty of space in front of Acalanes there where the sidewalk is to possibly widen that. But right now we're looking at just that Pleasant Hill corridor between Mount Diablo and Acalanes High School. And I feel that to make a commitment of a certain amount of money to have signalized lights makes no sense until we see how well the flashing beacons perform and how the public responds and how safe that makes that area. because in fact, that's what this is all about, trying to make it as safe as possible. And I would like to see a strip plan and us to continue to really look at options for this area. But again, I personally think that having a signal at those on and off ramps is going to wreak havoc in terms of traffic on the freeway, and really not improve the safety that much more. I would personally prefer to see a study of strip plan and a study of the broader corridor, because this is part of that. And I know that you're saying it's maybe 3 to 5 years before we look at the broad portion, but I want us to think of this as part of that broad portion as well. I really appreciate the work that's gone on by Matt and Mike and Patrick, and I continue. I want to have a continued dialogue. I think I represent most of my neighbors who really do not think that they would use a median pathway. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Any questions? Okay.
Next speaker, Stella Witherspoon.
And as Stella steps up, I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Anduri's question that I did review the December 6th correspondence, and I do think it is within the agenda description.
Welcome, Stella.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Good evening, Council. Stella Witherspoon. I speak only as myself and not representing Transportation Circulation Commission. And I'm in agreement with Janet Thomas, and I think also what Councilmember Anduri had said, which is I advocate for this council to conduct item 1, the strip map drawing with summary of pros, cons, and potential impacts. Really, because Caltrans has invested this almost $1 million in our community to improve pedestrian safety on Pleasant Hill Road with the RRFBs at each ramp, which is 18 total, 2 at the crosswalks, and then 1 advance signal, warning signal up a ways. And the existing conditions at the time the center median pathway was conceived have changed, and I think it would be helpful to understand the impacts of the RRFBs at the present time. And that preliminary information, I think, would help in determining if items 4 and 5 are worth pursuing. Those would be the signalized studies. So I think this investment really shows that Caltrans prioritizes the east side walk safety. And as such, the center median design, which is ongoing right now, must not degrade this facility by increasing the level of stress to existing sidewalk users. We've always known the traffic lanes would be shifted east under that center median design, but now we have a draft schematic that shows the traffic lane edge line will be only 3 to 4.3 feet away from the curb of the sidewalk, which is very short. And that's in that stretch between westbound 24 off-ramp to northbound Pleasant Hill Road and Acalanes Avenue. So just for perspective, the white hatched paint buffer that's adjacent to the green bike lane is 3.5 feet wide from edge to edge. So that's kind of approximately what you'll have, the distance from the edge line of the traffic to the curb. Pretty small, and it's really just not wide. It's not enough distance from the vehicles that would be traveling. We had seen the engineering traffic survey recently showed 43 miles per hour was the 85th percentile speed. So they're fast. They're very fast. So my ask is that you direct staff to have the consultants provide options for increased buffer widths in that 60% design plans that they'll be bringing back in February. And I also ask that you direct staff to hold a February public meeting in person at Acalanes Avenue in a workshop format, similar to what was held in December for the Connecting Lafayette School Street project, and have consultants there who can answer questions from the community, from council, from staff. I think we need to come together and collaborate and have conversation, because a lot of this is asynchronous, people putting in their comments and then not really necessarily always conversing and maybe hearing what each other are saying. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Stella. Is there any questions? I actually do have a question about, you're saying you'd want or suggesting that we have a public meeting in February, but that would be for looking at 60% of the center median design?
Yeah, exactly. That's what Matt had indicated was a tentative timeline for when the consultants would be bringing back what they have, which is a 65% version. And Matt had noted he would have a public meeting. And so my suggestion is to have it in person, have it up at Akalani's High School, and give the community and any residents who are interested, any community members who are interested, advocates, project advocates, council, consultants, I think would be a really important part of that meeting, to be able to just answer questions directly. Like, well, why is it this way? Why isn't it that way? And they can just tell us. And I think through collaboration, we might just be able to kind of find a solution that threads the needle.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
All right, are there any comments online?
Mayor Dawson, we have Rob Lavoy in our virtual audience, followed by Brad Rosenthal.
Thank you. Welcome, Rob.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Great, thank you. Two things that strike me. It seems like the way that this was defined is destined for failure. If we say that the only reason that the center path was designed was to bypass the freeway on and off ramps. As Carl mentioned, it just seems like we're sort of defining this so that it won't work. And I do think that the work that Caltrans has done needs to be considered carefully. And I also think that we don't need to wait for a traffic study to figure out the traffic counts and the pedestrian counts. We got this new equipment a few months ago that was supposed to provide traffic, pedestrian, and bike counts. And I haven't seen any of that data that was supposed to be put on the website. So I'd like to ask for that equipment to be put out, in these areas, and let's get our own data so that we paid for the equipment. Let's get the data and so we can see how many people are actually, walking on here, how many bikes are on here, how many cars are on here. And also maybe we can see if there's some kind of changes after the beacons get put up. People feel safer or whatever. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions for Rob? Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Brad Rosenthal.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the time. I wanted to bring up a couple of points tonight. The first is on demand. We still haven't seen a demand study done for this yet. No one has reached out to Akalani's Avenue to do a survey. Other similar type projects have surveys. I sent over in my public comments, sent over a link to a number of bike paths that actually do surveys. Unclear to me why we've done that. I have heard the, if you build it, they will come mentality. However, in a project like this that impacts tens of thousands of motorists that go through this corridor every day, I don't think we should be taking that approach. In addition, the emergency vehicles that go through this corridor from a regional level. And then sort of lastly, there's already been some serious accidents at the intersection of Stanley and PHR. So I don't think the if you build it, they will come mentality should be considered here. I think we really should be doing a demand study to understand who we're building for and what the demand would actually be. The second point is in the beacon lights. I did want to make sure that you all saw that the beacon lights have a light further off the off ramps, about 100 or so feet. So people would be getting an advanced warning that that the beacon lights are blinking. The third area I want to bring up is the buffer. So as Stella mentioned, the buffer goes down to about 2.5 to 4 feet south of Akalani's Avenue. There's going to be a number of people who do not want to take the center median, right? So I don't, for instance, I don't see people pushing strollers through the center median. And as a result of that, they're going to be taking the East Path walkway. And Eric Law actually kindly provided a picture of an accident on Pleasant Hill Road recently in his Facebook group in which a car went right over the curb. So we're going to have a 2.5 foot on Pleasant Hill Road, a 2.5 foot barrier right up against the road. So it's clear that the cars, it's already an issue on this street where cars go right up over the curb. The fourth issue I want to bring up is Valencia Street. I know it's a totally different project. There are no barriers, but the city moved forward with an initiative of not really garnering much support and moving forward with it. And that so far has at least been a colossal failure. There was articles out this past week around usage of bikes and how they've decreased, and there's been numbers of accidents. Totally understand it's a different project, but it's an instance of where city moved forward with something despite having a lot of opposition. And now they have to totally reconfigure the thing, or likely will have to. The last issue I want to bring up was in the Caltrans studies. My understanding is those would probably be covered under CPRA unless there's a legal basis not to do so. But the city attorney could probably opine on that. But presumably we should be able to get access to that if it's a state study, which or I guess was paid for by the state. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Councilmember Andrew has a question.
Yeah, Brad, what was your second issue? I missed it.
The beacon lights. So the beacon lights, there's, if you look at the schematics that were provided in the public comments, you'll see beacon lights that are 100 or so feet further up off the off ramps. And Matt could probably give us the exact footage. So cars, when they're coming off the off ramps, will be getting a warning well in advance.
Oh, okay.
That there's that the beacon lights are blinking.
Great.
Unlike some of the other beacon lights that I've seen around, particularly on Stanley Boulevard or even around the BART station.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Next speaker is Michelle.
Thank you. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi there, City Council. Happy New Year. This is Michelle Greer. I live in the Acalanes Avenue neighborhood. Have spoken many times in the past on this subject. I don't really have anything new to add. I just wanted to be an extra share of voice in agreement with my fellow community members such as Stella and Janet and Brad. I echo everything that they have said and the concerns that they have brought up. And just would like to, in addition, in October of 23, on a picture perfect bike riding type of day, I went over to Acalanes High School and counted the number of bikes that are in the bike rack there on what I would consider, just beautiful, like I said, picture perfect weather. And there were all of 25 bicycles sitting in the bike racks. So just a question to go back to the demand as to, do we need this middle of the road center bike lane to completely disrupt not only an entire neighborhood, but being built for, let's say, half of those bicycles come through Pleasant Hill Road to get to school. We're talking about maybe, anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe 17 bikes. And, we as a neighborhood we'll keep an eye on that bike rack and be happy to take pictures of the bike rack as the weather turns here this winter, just to show that there really isn't that much of a demand for Acalanes students, because so many of them, given their gear and books that they have to carry, inclement weather, do get rides to school or drive themselves. The other thing that I just like to bring up again, I walk my daughter to school. Coming out of Acalanes Avenue, getting onto the sidewalk on the east side of Pleasant Hill Road. Many times in the morning, we'll scooter or we'll bike. And like Brad mentioned, there was an accident of a car that came right up onto the sidewalk. And I'm sorry, but a middle of the road bike lane is not going to help the families that are walking their children to Spring Hill Elementary, and especially bringing those cars closer when we eliminate that buffer. And that's a big concern of mine, because it would make it impossible for me to walk my daughter to school safely if it were to go into play. So, you're giving a handful of bicyclists at Acalanes something that they don't need or we don't know that they want, and taking away an entire neighborhood's ability to walk their children safely to the elementary school just further down the street. That's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there questions? No, Michelle, I just want to clarify too that it's the pathway, the corridor that we're looking at is really also connecting the different network and pedestrian trails that we have through town, trails and paths. And it's not just the Occolani High School students that we're trying to accommodate, but the wider community. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate them.
Mayor Dawson, we have no additional speakers at this time.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll bring it back to our discussion. Matt is looking for direction at this point. And it doesn't sound like it has been that you've come back to all the different stakeholders that we've asked you to follow up with and have given us the information that we need now to come to a decision on what we want to do here with this consideration of the east side. So would anyone like to start off with their comments? Did you want to follow up on what you wanted to make from the public comments earlier that we read? Oh, about the, what was it?
Okay, well, I'll just say I agree completely with Councilmember Candel's December 6th email, in which she points out that with respect to the center median, 2 points. One is that we should ask Kittleson to make the east side buffer as wide as possible. And second, we should let them know that the impact of the center median project on the east side path will be one of the key metrics when we make further decisions with respect to the center pathway. I know from my own decision-making on that, if it turns out that the center pathway negatively impacts the east side pathway, that will be a factor. I'm not saying it's a determinative factor, but it's certainly a factor in decision-making. So I just want to make sure that as they're coming up on their 60% work, that they're looking at what they can do to not, at a minimum, not degrade the safety of the east side path. And if there's any way to enhance it, that's great.
Okay. They already have been given that direction before they even started the 60% plans. And you may remember, and we've had come to you 3 times now. One of those, I did show the buffer areas. So we're looking at how can we create the buffer areas. And to the last speaker's point, if you're coming out of Acalanes and you're trying to walk towards the high school, that area, the buffer space available now and the buffer space available with the center median pathway will be the same, because you've got a turn pocket there that wipes out most of your buffer right off the get-go. And you may recall I talked to the fire department about how that buffer could be created, but still make it so that cars could scoot over so that they could get by. So that portion, the buffer is pretty good. The rest of it, there really aren't a whole lot of opportunities to create more buffer. We have so little space out there. So any shifting of the lanes that we need to do to accommodate the center median is going to reduce the buffer space between the lanes and the sidewalk. To create bigger buffer than Stella pointed out, the numbers spot on. Thank you, Stella. To make those bigger, you're going to have to start moving curb and gutter and sidewalk, existing sidewalk, tearing that out and pushing it further away as part of the center median project. And that wasn't in the design scope that we gave to Kittleson. If that's something we want to do, we could, but it's going to cost more money. And I don't think we have a whole lot of money left in the design budget for that project.
And so would that in their report, because there'll be a pros cons, I'm assuming, in their report, would they report that as a con?
If we fund the strip map for the east side?
No.
There's
On
no
the
more
median
report.
project, would they say, because we are reducing the buffer over there, right? They would point that out.
We're not doing pros and cons on that anymore.
Oh, we're not doing
We're-
pros and cons.
we're
Okay, it'll
past
just be
that. We're
us
just
looking at it and doing our own pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, the next step is the 60% plans.
Okay.
So typically at 60% plans, you're just confirming that it is more or less following the direction that was given. You're not making wholesale changes to alignments, things of that nature. It's very unusual for anything more than just a presentation showing, here's what we're going to do. Do you have any questions about how we're going to build it? Like, when's it going to get built? How will it impact my commute? Things like that. At 60% plans, you're not workshopping it and stuff, because then you're talking about wanting to completely redo what your design scope is. That kind of answer that?
I guess so, yeah. Is there a way for us to make more comments? Oh, go ahead. That's actually, I'll wait to the end on that one. Go ahead, Teresa.
So I think still on the same topic that we've been talking about on the buffer. So right now, there are concerns, let me see how I can still tie it. So what I think you're hearing is that we would be interested in having the consultant look at, are there ways, as we're still looking at the center median, to improve the safety, the buffer in those other areas. And thank you. We were very clear on wanting to make sure between Acalanes Avenue and Stanley that we didn't lose or create more stress there. But then I'm going to do this south of there to Mount Diablo, in looking at where the buffers are now. And thank you to Stella and both of you have, I know, spent a lot of time, and Patrick, looking at those. We're seeing that it does create more stress level, in those areas. And so what we're, I think, trying to figure out now, and you just mentioned there may not be any money left, but is there something that Kittleson could bring forward as part of the design for the center median that looks at creating the east side, not changing the east side so much that it makes it, creates more stress there, so that the people who are going to walk that, and then I think we'll get a little bit, I had questions about how we can evaluate the conditions that will be in place once the RRFBs are actually active, that Caltrans has been doing. But even with that not there, is there a way to look at, as part of what Kittleson's doing, and using their consulting expertise to do that?
In a nutshell, I don't think there is. I mean, I have now stared at this street far more than any person should, because I also designed the overlay project that we did on it. So I'm painfully aware of the geometry out there. So by putting a 10-foot center median in, that land has to come from somewhere. And a good chunk of that stretch has a very, very skinny existing center median. So it's got to come from the sides of the road. What people want us to do, if we're going to put in a center median, at least this is what I'm hearing, is go ahead. Okay, you can put the center median in, but I want the buffers to be exactly the same as they are now on the east side. You just can't do that. There isn't enough room to do that. The land has to come from somewhere. So Kittleson has been told we want to enhance the buffers on the east side as best we can. So be it striping, we thought of striping, extra curbing. There's all sorts of what do you want that to look like? Arguably, if you have 2 feet of extra space, conceivably you could put a guardrail in, but I think Caltrans might take issue with that. But there just isn't any room left. So if, to Councilmember Anduri's point, if having a reduced buffer when you put the center median pathway in is a deal breaker on that, because you want to have two paths of travel, not just the center median, but you also want to have the east side, then the center median isn't going to work because there's not enough real estate out there to have your cake and eat it too.
So question on that one, I mean, so I mean, you're actually just saying that we won't be able to improve between Occolani's Road and the off-ramp with the existing buffer. The buffer's going to be small. And in your opinion, then you really don't think that the center median probably is the right choice? That's what you kind of just said, and I'm kind of surprised.
If you want to have two paths of
Pathways.
travel,
Well, I mean, you want to have, I think the residents have been very clear. They're still going to use that, right? And now with the RRFBs, of course they're going to use that, right? And so it seems pretty clear that there's demand for that. And you see people walking on it now, quite a bit. And so, all right, I guess
yeah. So
you don't think that there's another way around? Okay.
if you want to keep the existing east side path the way it is and have a buffer,
Well, just not,
there
maybe
isn't
not
enough
as,
room.
I mean, 2 feet seems close to 45 miles per hour, free, people coming off the freeway. That seems pretty close. I don't think they're asking for it to be like it is today, but maybe a little better than that.
Right. So if you wanted to make it, if you want to make a bigger buffer than that, what that will entail is moving curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights further out.
Okay.
That, and my understanding of the question is what can we do to enhance the buffer given the existing east side curb, gutter, and sidewalk? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If we want to incorporate reconstructing the east side sidewalk further away from the road as part of the center median project, that is a very big design scope change that we don't have the design budget for.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments for discussion? Okay,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to, just in clarity, like it is true, we have approved the design for the central median pathway, and now we're just talking about how we can enhance or look at as an alternate the east side. And it is very clear from what you're saying that if as designed, as we've directed it to be designed, there is just no room to do a class 1 with enhancements. So it is really, I think, a question now of, I would think, just looking at this discussion points here again, it sounds like what would be good to do is at least look at number 1, so we can at least flesh that out a little and see what that looks like. So are we agreed that
Right. And then I think we probably want to have some clarity. I bet you guys would want clarity on if we want to do it. So looking at number 1 with a class 1 leading up to the RRFBs or leading up to possibly potential lane configurations. I think that is a question here that we should at least consider. And it seems like if we go for the lane, you gave us out the money to do a lane configuration, and it's to change the off-ramp lane configurations, to add in the stop lights and the lights, traffic signals and everything. And so I think that we should.
that's number
Not-
7?
No, like this, the roadmap that Matt gave us includes the whole everything. It's to
Ladder
change
stuff, right,
everything,
yeah.
right? And so is there, and that's what I was trying to get at before, is there a way for us to do this, to just do a strip map to the now RRFBs with a class 1 and kind of get a concept of where that would get us? Do we want to do both, or we want to do just one?
Well,
I guess that's my question.
That's my understanding of what number 1 is.
Okay, good, perfect.
Right.
Is that, I want to make.
It's
Yes,
right, a
you
strip
are
map,
correct.
drawing for east side class 1 I mean, it's not there, but I assume it's class one, multi-user pathway with summary of pros, cons, and potential impacts. So that, and then,
Okay.
and I guess the, does it matter if they wait to do that until the RFFBs or RBBFs are in place? Should we ask them to wait?
A potential thought on this would be, I forget which resident commented on wanting, I think it was Janet, wanting to see how the RRFBs work. Right now, the issue with, normally we would do a lot of this work in-house. Staff would do this. Right now, we don't have staff time available to do this. I suspect we may have staff time available to do this in next winter or fall to do a strip map. That's not massively time consuming. And that would give us time to see how the RRFBs work out, and then it wouldn't cost you anything. Well, it would cost you staff time, but you wouldn't need to write a check for it. But you
Yeah.
have to wait a year.
Yeah, I like that idea because it does give us time to, as Janet Thomas mentioned, and I think also just to get, what do the RFPs gain us, Bs gain us? I know there's a lot on engineering's plate, though. Is that something infeasible? Because obviously the budget is an issue. We're talking about money we don't have. So your idea is a grand one, but is that realistic with your constructions of September and
Where I'm sitting today, I believe it is realistic. We have already hired a consultant to do one of the big projects that we're doing in the following year is repaving a big chunk of St. Mary's Road. We already hired a consultant to do that, and that is a very big chunk of our workload for that year. So we just have a couple other smaller streets to do and potentially a pathway. So my design team, Tim and Anna, they're getting much more proficient. So I'm hoping that between the three of us, one of us should have enough time to develop a strip map. Strip maps aren't that hard to do. They're relatively straightforward. So I'm very optimistic that, by January 1 of 2025, we will have had a strip map that we can take to the public for public meetings.
And could that include a pros and cons analysis then?
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Gallagher?
I had it on. I noticed at one point, we're all very excited about this map. At one point, we all had our lights on. So just clarification. So the $17,000 that for option one, that's in our menu of options, assumes that we would go out give this to a consultant, Kittleson,
Correct.
somebody. Okay. And that timing we could still go to Kittleson. I mean, today we could potentially say option one, approving it up to the $17,000. It could be done with some cost savings by staff later. Because I too think that it's very important that we get some idea. That's why I was asking about, did Caltrans do any kind of traffic studies ahead of putting these in? And I appreciate that they're doing them everywhere, and maybe they didn't do really specific studies. They know this will improve safety to some extent by raising awareness of pedestrians. It would be great if there was some traffic analysis and study and things like that, but we can do our own internal with the strip map. Or, I mean, how would we judge? We're going to see what happens with the RFBs. We're going to do the strip map. We're going to do pros and cons. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how are we going to evaluate the efficacy of the RRFBs?
Well, Patrick has been working with the streetlight software, which is, I think, the equipment that one of the speakers was referencing, because I don't know of any other equipment that we would have. But
I think also some of our LiDAR, yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, that wouldn't be appropriate for this, but the streetlight data, if you recall from one of the myriads of meetings we've had on this, we were able to get traffic or cyclist and pedestrian counts coming through the area. It's actually far higher than you would expect. It was in the high hundreds per day, which I would never have guessed that. So we have access to that data. After the RRFBs go in, we can certainly look at streetlight and see what that gets us. So at least you're comparing apples and apples. The data came from the same source. Beyond that, I'm not sure what other study information we could get. We haven't had any reported injuries or fatalities or any of that at these intersections. So I suppose if we get one of those, that would be bad. And we don't want that. But beyond just looking at streetlight data, I'm not sure what study information we could have. And we can certainly share that with you when we get to that point.
But what about doing a survey of the people in the neighborhood that take it? And see what
Yeah.
they think about the RFPs, right?
Or what about if, before we were describing kind of the ladder where we do, like, it would be 31K if you did the strip and then the different surveys. Could you, if we saved money by doing it in-house, could we, also look at those traffic surveys? What is that, the
So a lot of the surveyors are looking at how does a signalized intersection impact it? And from what I'm hearing from everybody, that isn't really what people want to do, which that's fine, because I'm concerned that the likelihood of us achieving that is extraordinarily low.
the cost?
So the way I envision it in my head is you prepare the strip map, and you look at streetlight data to see what it tells you. Have a public meeting, ask people for their input as to whether they like how the RRFBs are functioning, if that seems to be meeting their needs. And here's our strip map showing what we could do to make the east side better as an alternative project. I think it's kind of important to pull these two projects apart.
Right.
They keep trying to get jammed together, and that makes it a very awkward discussion. But that's how I would envision going forward. And if we do that, the cost of that approach is simply staff time.
Okay, I think, Councilmember Kwok, do you have any other comment you might want to add?
Yeah, I wonder, thank you. If you could just, Matt, if you could clarify on option 1, the strip map concept, whether it's done in-house or outside, is that will the design be contemplating whether the existence of a median strip in the middle plus this, or in the absence of the median strip? And this would be an alternative.
It would be an alternative. So it would be in the absence of the center median.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
You bet.
Okay, I think, I don't think this is necessarily a vote, but a direction. Are we agreed that that might be a way to go or do we want to budget money for it, which we don't have?
Yeah, I guess the question is, do we want to wait until January of 2025 to have the next word on this alternative? Or do we want to spend money to get it sooner? I think that's maybe the question now.
Well, I think there is a plan for the center median design to come, and as we know, it's just a design. It's not us saying we're gonna be constructing that, but there will be a time we'd want to have all of these things that we're looking at one time. And to your point, looking at them right now, it's confusing the matters because we have different things ahead of us, but same time, it's one corridor. So I personally think it would be good to have, I think the timeline to save money on this makes sense. It is a year out. We'll be able to get the data and some kind of survey and the pros and cons by the end of the year. And we can have that in hand along with the design for the center pathway. And we'll hopefully have more information from Caltrans at that point too. Anything, if we, whatever data we can, and just bring it forward to look at it as a corridor plan. So my thought would be to take advantage of what Matt's offering to do in-house. But I welcome.
I actually agree with that. And it's because of the RRFB data, right? This is the only way that we can get that included is to wait. And so we could do a strip map and then do the traffic analysis afterwards, or we can just wait for both and save money. So.
Yeah, I would agree and support the mayor and Councilmember Kendall's views as well.
I agree with that also.
Okay.
Want to add anything?
I was just going to ask Matt, on the center median, it continues with Kittleson through this timeline that you have on one of the pages in the email conversation, going back through, that has this being out for comments and the environmental review by August 1st of 2024. So how does that, and keeping them separate, as we've been talking about, but how does that, how do those two things work together? I'm generally supportive. I'm just how we're working through the timing of the other alternative that is currently in the works.
So all of the work associated with the center median that still needs to be done to get it to the point where it could conceivably go out to bid is still on part of my workload, moving things through. That plus lots of other things is why the strip map can't really be done until much later in the year. So I envision hopefully things starting to clear up for Anna and Tim around October, which means things will start lightening up a little bit for me in October. So at that point, we could start looking at strip maps. By October, Kittleson will be all done. I believe on the schedule by then, they'll be all done.
Yeah, August 1st.
Yeah.
So in the following paragraph to that timeline, you note that there should be plenty of time in this schedule, the center median schedule, to look at possible modifications to striping and possibly minor changes to the existing east side sidewalk if the city council wishes to expand the scope work. So Kittleson finishes their work. There's a design. It's on a shelf in a little alternative package. Then what we as a council are leaning toward right now is doing more of that in-depth east side work to see, is that, after the RRFBs, is that a viable alternative on its own? Does it then, is it able to then go back also and look at that center design to say, can they both be there? I'm not trying to muddy the water,
No,
but.
no, I get where you're coming from. The short answer is I still don't think you have the real estate for both to be there. But let's say you got the center median design and then we do the strip map and we have a grand epiphany of something that could be different. And that would make the center median palatable to everybody and everybody would greet it with open arms. At that point, we could go back to Kittleson and say, we'd like to make a revision to the center median design, and we could do that. I mean, it might cost us a little bit of money at that point, but we could do it. I'm not optimistic that we're going to have that epiphany. I think it's going to be a pick one kind of situation.
And I appreciate you bringing that scheduling up. And I just want to reassure, obviously, the community that there will be many times, we're always open to the public comment. There will be meeting times where we'll be discussing the center median at these various points where obviously we can also ask for updates on, maybe the data itself or what it's looking like or anecdotally. So there will always be that avenue open. Okay, I think, do you have enough direction on that now?
I think so. I just would like to
So
add
do we actually have to do some kind of a motion?
Oh, we do. Is this about, okay,
I
thank you.
think so.
Okay.
one little thing I would like to add to your last thing is right now, staff is only planning on having one public meeting, and that's at the 60% plans. I would then give the city council an update as to how that meeting went. But that's the only remaining center median public meeting that is anticipated prior to finishing the design. Now, like with all of our projects, say 3-4 years from now, we're building the center median pathway. We would have a public meeting to let everybody know we're building it and here's what you can expect in the process. I just want to make sure. It's
Thank you.
public notice.
Expectations are correctly set. Yes.
So
Thank you.
May I ask a clarification on that? So what will the format of that public meeting be? There was a request to have it be similar to the one that I know Councilmember Candell and I attended related to Connect Lafayette in December. Will there be the plans and dots and things, or it's really, this is where we are and updating less?
Yeah, the intent is to update people on what the center median pathway design is looking like and hear, minor tweaks like, could you restripe this crosswalk, or could you paint this curb red? Little things like that is the intent of that meeting. My intent is to have that as a Zoom meeting because over the last 3 years having meetings for this project, I found that the Zoom meetings had far higher participation rates than I've been getting in public meetings. Even our School Street project, when we had the open house public meeting, we didn't have anywhere near as many people at that as I had at my Zoom Pleasant Hill Road meeting. I mean, maybe it's because my project made more people mad. I don't know, but I just think people find it easier to comment on the Zoom meetings. But if the city council wishes me to have it as a live meeting, I certainly can do that.
I would want to encourage as much participation as possible. So I think that's a noble thought about the Zoom meeting for access. So. And we'll note it obviously beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, then, with that, then shall we, then I'll take a vote. And it looks like we are voting on approving of option 1, but looking at providing that strip map in-house.
And is that a motion, Mayor?
That is, oh yes, can someone make that motion, I guess?
I'll move that we direct staff to prepare a strip map concept drawing for the East Side Class 1 multi-user pathway with a summary of pros and cons and potential impacts. And they do that after the installation of the RFFBs and sufficient time to evaluate the efficacy of the RFFBs, but no later than January 2025.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Councilmember Anduri moved, seconded by Councilmember Candell. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Anduri,
Aye.
Councilmember Candell,
Aye.
Councilmember Geringer,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Quock.
Aye.
And I am an aye. That is a unanimous direction.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Matt.
You bet.
Okay, we now move on to staff reports. And this is the announcement of the city council vacancy. Molly, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dawson. As you're aware, on December 15th, 2023, Councilmember Geringer announced her resignation, which will be effective on January 23rd. She has served on the council since 2018, but her term does not expire until November of 2026. Given the length of time left on the term under state law, the council must fill the vacancy within 60 days, and the person that the council appoints to fill the vacancy will fill the vacancy only until the next regularly scheduled municipal election. That election will be in November of this year, of 2024. So this year, in the November election, we will have 3 council seats that will be up, that will be 4-year terms, and then 1 council seat that will be the remainder of the 2-year term, Councilmember Gallagher's term. Back in 2019, the council adopted a resolution establishing a policy on how to fill vacancies. The policy is very detailed, and it provides for the council announcing the vacancy, the council directing the city clerk to advertise the position, but for no more than 2 weeks. Then you will conduct interviews of all of the candidates who submit an application. We are also recommending, as in the past, that the mayor and the vice mayor meet in advance to prepare questions. The staff report indicates that those questions could then be considered by the council at a public meeting on January 26th. I will note that in the past, you have done it right before the interviews. So you could also choose to do it the hour before the interviews occur, such that the candidates don't necessarily have much notice of the questions. That's a council preference. And we are also requesting that you schedule at least 2 interview dates to conduct the interviews. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mala. Does anybody have any questions about this? Yes, please.
Thank you. I do have a question, is that how did we prepare the questions last time? I'm not remembering that it was just the mayor and vice mayor. I thought we've each submitted some, at least at one of them we did, where we had.
You can't, the problem with having council members submit questions in
Right.
advance would it be a Brown Act issue. So that's why we're suggesting an ad hoc committee of 2 council members, at least kind of start the discussion. So in this case, in the past, we had the mayor and the vice mayor create a list of questions. And then I think that list of questions was brought back to the full council.
And then we
council
modified them.
Modified it, exactly.
Okay, then, okay.
That's exactly what happened.
So when you say that, then that would be, we should include that in this.
Yeah, that is, that's functionally recommendation 3 is direct the mayor and vice mayor to draft interview questions for consideration by the council. So really, you'll consider revise accordingly. And then, I think at the last meeting, then you designate which council member asks which question and what order. You go through that level of detail.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Councilmember Andre?
Okay, so the process that was adopted in 2019 says that position be advertised for up to 2 weeks. In the recommendation that we've gotten, it says advertise the position for 2 weeks, but we don't need to do it for a full 2 weeks, correct?
Correct. It says for no longer than 2 weeks in the resolution.
Okay,
So
and I just want to confirm with the city clerk that the advertising actually could begin as early as tomorrow. If we, because I assume social media.
Social media, correct.
Okay. All right, so this is questions, but I just have to tell you, I'm going to have a proposal because I'm going to be out for 3 weeks from February 4th to 25th. So my preference, I think one issue is, do we want to fill the vacancy before February 4th, or do you want to wait until March? My proposal would be that we set that we begin advertising tomorrow, that we set the application close at 8 a.m. on January 25th and conduct the first interviews on January 29th and the second interviews on January 31st. And then the rest of the recommendations still work.
I appreciate that proposal. Are there any other questions? And then we can maybe move to discussion. No, I think that's good, Carl. It's good information. Okay, why don't we do this, see if there's any public comment, and then we can discuss that.
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips for members participating in the community hall, and I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Okay, then let's start with that. Announcing the vacancy on the council, I would agree to advertise as soon as possible so we can get the ball rolling. So just looking around, why don't we go down the line here? Do we agree on that? Little nods of heads or, okay, then we'll move on to advertising position 2 weeks. That's tomorrow. That's number 2. Oh, yes. First off, I should say, it is with regret that we do, if we accept this resignation, Teresa. So that goes without saying, as it did. We love you and we'll miss you. So third, let's skip over to fourth and consider your proposal. I don't see an issue with that. I think the sooner that we move on this, the better, and get the word out and get the interviews going, the schedule set would be best. Is there anyone that has any disagreement or questions about that? No, it's
A little bit of a discussion. How quickly did we do it last time? Just to kind of, we've done it twice recently, right? And so unfortunately, did we give longer? Because we do a quick schedule, I think we can totally do it. And I think us as a council can totally do it. But I'm just trying to see, as those people, those applicants, did we give them a lot more time last time?
We did.
Oh, we did.
We gave, I sent the timeline to the mayor. If you can pull it up, the Councilmember Burks announced his resignation on July 12th. We had the first set of interviews on August 12th.
19th,
Or
August
19th. And then the 25th was the
24th.
second interviews.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's a lot
it was
longer.
it was longer, but it was summer. We had travel
Right.
issues.
But actually, I mean, Teresa announced that she was departing on the
December 15th.
Yeah.
Sorry, December 15th.
15th, so that's.
It's been in the
so
prep.
If we do our first interview on the 29th, that's more time.
Yeah.
So that's a
Thank
week
you.
longer.
You're right.
Yep.
Yes, I would just chime in to say that since Councilmember Geringer did give advance notice, and although she will serve until January 22nd, that has given the public essentially a buffer time, albeit during the holidays, that we don't actually start the 60-day clock ticking until January 23rd, right? Our requirement is that we fill the position, but if not, if starting January 23rd plus 60 days, January, February, March 22nd or so would be around the legally required date to fill it. But we have had advance notice. And so I think the sort of the formalization of getting it out on social media, I think it was quite widely publicized in the press. And that therefore gives me, ordinarily, if that did not happen and we were to hear about it on January 22nd, then I think having more time would be wise. But I think we've actually had a month head start here.
Yes, and we also have the scheduling challenge, or I could say an opportunity to do this sooner than later with Councilmember Andori being out of town. So I guess on that note, then can you repeat your proposal again as far as timing so we can be clear?
Yep, that the city clerk begin advertising and social media tomorrow. Well, all the other advertising, the city clerk is an expert, so I won't go into any more of that. That we would announce that applications will close at 8 a.m. on January 25th. That provides 3 days notice to the public as to when and where the interviews will take place and who the candidates are. So the first interview would be on Monday evening, the 5th Monday in January. We fortunately have a 5th Monday this month at 7 p.m. or whenever we choose. And then we schedule the second day of interviews if we need it. for the 31st, because my understanding is that the mayor is giving her State of the City address on the 1st, so that date,
Yes,
we know where we'll be on that date.
yes. And that would be great, actually, to announce that. Okay, why don't we make that into a motion?
And when you're doing the motion, can we give specific dates so it's very clear?
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
And then
can
can
I-
I also add, are we going to direct the mayor and the vice mayor to do interview questions? And
Yeah.
when
okay, I was gonna treat
no,
that separately, but let's,
that sounds good, but I think the calendar clearing, is everybody available on the 29th and 31st?
Vice Mayor Kwok, do those dates work with you?
Yes, what time were we thinking of starting? The typical 7 or 6 or 5?
Yeah, I think it depends on the applicants, but also this kind of leads into the question of the getting the questions together, because in the past, there was that hour before the interview started where council did review the questions and kind of looked at what the questions were going to be and who was going to ask them, et cetera. So I would say about 6, unless we do decide to bring the questions to January 22nd, which would mean that's more of a public discussion. And that would give the interviewer, so it depends on our approach to that, what we also are thinking on that.
We can't discuss the questions in closed session, can we?
No, you can't.
Okay. So I'd be in favor of doing it the hour before the session.
The,
Yeah.
yeah.
Clear, okay.
What
I
are the
do
thoughts,
too, actually.
Andre?
I think it's good.
And start at 6.
And start at 6 or 5, TBD. Wait, we don't have to,
To be
okay.
determined depending on the number.
How
of
many
applicants.
numbers?
If
Okay,
we
so
get-
we can set it at the meeting on the 22nd if we.
Or the mayor can set it
Oh.
in conjunction with the city clerk,
Yeah.
presuming that you're all available
Sure.
as early as 5. Maybe.
Vice Mayor Kwok, would 6 o'clock, what is your time frame?
Both those times on the 29th and the 31st are fine with me. Anytime after 5 o'clock.
Anytime after 5. Okay, thank you for that. All right, in that case, that we can probably do this all in one
Yeah.
motion if we're done.
Okay, so I will move that the council announce the vacancy on the city council, sadly. 2, that the council direct the city clerk to begin advertising the position on January 9th and continue advertising until January 24th. 3, that the deadline for accepting applications be set at 8 a.m. on January 25th. 4, that the date of the interviews be set for January 29th and 31st, and that the times be determined by the city clerk and the mayor. 5, that the council direct the mayor and vice mayor to draft interview questions for consideration by the council at the January 29th interview session. And then 6, that the clerk, no, we've done that. We don't need the next one, I don't think. Okay, that's the motion.
I second.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Andori, for putting that motion together, and seconded by Councilmember Candell. Roll call vote. Councilmember Andori,
Aye.
Councilmember Candell,
Aye.
Councilmember Geringer,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Kwok.
Aye.
I am a aye as well, unanimous for that process. Thank you. Thank you, Mala. Okay, all right. Thank you. We are on to public hearings. Is you, Ms. Robinson? Thank you.
Yeah, staff report. So I am going to be presenting to you the 23-24 final municipal budget. So this final budget is a refinement of the proposed budget. What this includes is the actual expenses for prior fiscal year 22-23. It also includes changes that have been approved by the city council between June and December. And then it also is an opportunity to just tweak the budget for certain areas, which I will go through. I will go through those specific changes, although there are very few. So overall, the city did for the 22-23 fiscal year, end up in a good position. I want to just make one correction on page 1 of the city manager staff report. It should be that the financial audit is complete, as you heard Ms. Wakeman tell you earlier, and the auditor's numbers show that it should be for fiscal year 22-23. Actual expenses were $2.6 million less than budgeted, and the revenue was $900,000 more than budgeted. So that puts the city in a little better position than anticipated. Although, as I'll talk about later, our challenges still persist. We still are projecting budget deficits in the coming year, although slightly less than what we had in the proposed budget. And I'll go through some of those changes. So the expense variances were due primarily to projects that were deferred. There were some staff openings. Police services was under budget. And then there were some general cost savings. We just saved money. It was about 2.5% of the budget. Adds up, like I said, to about 2.6 million. The revenue variances, this also is a change that should be made on page 2. It wasn't the property tax transfer, it was property taxes, actually came in higher than we expected. Vehicle taxes also came in higher. We had higher investment earnings, which is, I guess, one bright spot in higher interest rates. And the transient occupancy was higher. So all of those added up to about $900,000 more. So moving on to, I'm going to go over specifically the changes that were made that you had not already approved. So if we're on page 3 of the city manager's report, everything was approved except this was added under police services. There was a police vehicle that was totaled in a collision. That's $80,000. That includes the vehicle plus the build and the equipment. We are still working with MPA to see how much of that may be reimbursed. We also added $90,000 for radio encryption that was required by a California law. I actually asked Chief Aldrich to give me some additional information specifically on what that was. So I can bring that back to you at the next meeting, because that is quite a lot of money. And I think we specifically should understand what is required, why it's required, and why it's so much money. But he told me it would be 90,000, so I did add it to this budget. And then there was $27,000 he asked for equipment for the Slow Down Lafayette campaign. Mayor Anduri and I had a conversation today where he reminded me that Chief Aldrich said that he could probably have absorbed that in his prior budget with some of the savings. That is probably true, but I did want to call it out because it is an additional program. There were additional costs. So I do think it's important that we don't, especially as we go into being very transparent, as we always are, about the expenses, that even if this can be covered by savings, that we do call it out so that residents understand that these programs cost money. So everything else was actually approved by the council either in June when we did amendments to the proposed budget or elsewhere during the year. Let's moving on. There really were no changes in personnel. I just do want to point out that there are currently 3 positions of the 5 new positions that were added. 3 continue to be open. That is the senior engineer, the admin analyst personnel, and the admin analyst city manager. Thus far, we have not been successful in recruiting a senior engineer, although we have tried on a number of occasions. We have gotten very few candidates. We have left the administrative analyst positions open for the time being, mostly because we want to make sure that we have ongoing funding available for those positions, because we just don't think it would be fair to hire those positions unless we know there's funding to hire them for a year or 2 and then potentially have to cut them. Sinking fund changes, again, were all approved by you before. I just did want to call that the remainder of the ARPA funds for the first tranche, I just rebudgeted everything, so we cleared that sinking fund. As we spend it, I will just continue to rebudget it, but I feel like this is just cleaner. I will be bringing back to you at the next meeting a recap of what we have spent the ARPA funds on, what we've budgeted the first tranche for, so that you can see more clearly what's left going forward. So that's just a recap. I'll bring that back to the next meeting. Everything else, as I said, was approved. The only transfer changes that are different, these fund transfer changes, are just when the city engineer and I just looked back and rebudgeted projects. We just transfers from gas taxes and Measure J to Fund 14 were just trued up, so that those numbers were changed just to accommodate the actuals that were spent and projects that were being rolled over. And then also we transferred $1.5 million from the public facilities back to the city offices fund. As you recall, we had moved all of that money out when we were contemplating buying 2 properties. We only bought 1 property, so we just transferred that money back to the city offices fund. Let's see. So just, in conclusion, the 5-year model, even though we did slightly better, the 5-year model still does show in the out years a deficit of approximately 10%. We did get some very little relief by the fact that the property taxes were slightly more, so I use that as a base and we grow from there. So you will see that the 5-year model does not project quite as large a deficit, but we are still talking over $1.7 million in the out years. And again, I just want to point out that those are for ongoing expenses. They don't really include anything for special projects. In fact, I specifically take out special projects that we're doing this year in future years, because I don't want to build on a too big of a base. All right. So those numbers, again, they're estimates, but they should reflect ongoing costs, but they are really not a lot of new projects. So those projects, for example, you can see an example of some of the things that I take out under reserve standard. Those are similar projects. I don't ask the city to reserve money on special projects. The 60% is not calculated on these. So these are sort of the same monies that are taken out in future years. So we don't double count those. So let's see. So again, there really is not anything new. We're still on the same trajectory. Obviously, we'll be coming to you in the future to talk about how we may address these shortfalls in the future. But at this time, we're just asking you to, if you have any questions, if you have any changes, please let me know. And then at the very next meeting, I can bring it back, include any changes. And obviously, there's a couple corrections that need to be done. and you can approve it at the next meeting. And I'll be printing physical copies.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Is there any questions about the report? Councilmember Andor, you have your light on. Oh. Okay, that's a no.
Councilmember.
Vice Mayor Kwok, question?
Great. Thank you for a very thorough report. A lot of work has gone into this for sure. I had a question about, you mentioned earlier about how investment earnings have increased. As we all know, interest rates took a sharp upturn last year in 2023. And so I guess I have a two-part question. Number one is, are we able to, or what strategies were you able to use to shift to higher interest bearing ways of investing the city's money? And then also, how do we forecast those higher interest rates into the upcoming budget? What type of returns are you forecasting for the upcoming budget?
I wish Jennifer was here. That is not an exact science. I will tell you the way that we have done it is that we have a strategy where we ladder our funds. So we ladder them in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year length investments. So as nearer term investments fall off and we reinvest them out at like 4 and 5 years. So if the yield curve looks as it's supposed to, you should be getting higher returns farther out as you invest them longer. So that's one way that we've done it. It's just our strategy. Again, we as the investments fall off or they mature. So the investments that we had invested in at 1% and 2%, as they fall off, we invest them out at the 5 years, and those are higher rates, 5, 3, 4, they're probably more like 4 or 5%. So that's what we do. That's just a normal strategy that captures that. I did not do a very a robust analysis. It was just a matter of projecting where we were in the past, because we have to, it's not necessarily an exact science, because we have to figure out how much cash we have at any given time. So I would say that the projection is not an exact science. It's just more of a trend.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
This is just the, just
Yes,
a
please.
process. So this is just for the budget, and the council priorities will be a completely different topic.
I have council priorities as a separate topic.
Okay, perfect. And are you taking public comment on each of these separately, or what?
Yeah, we probably should. Okay. Any other questions here? No. Okay. Any public comment?
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips in the community hall, but I have Rob Lavoy has his hand raised.
Welcome, Rob.
Hello again. Thank you for taking this comment. I had two questions. I was wondering if you could comment on the number of past years where we've had a positive variance on the higher property taxes with the skyrocketing home values, and every time one of those turns over, that's going to generate a new tax basis. So seems like that is a potential for future years as well. And also talking about your laddering of securities, have you considered maybe going out to like 7 to 10 years to lock in at these new high rates? And then maybe keep a couple of years at a shorter term so you have liquidity, but you could always sell a 10-year bond if the rates drop at a premium. So that would be a positive thing. This is the opposite problem we've had in the past, 15 or 20 years. So it's a great time to consider something like that.
Thank you for that.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I think, do we want to take that question? Any comment about the higher property taxes that sits on this curve lately? But do you have any comment on that?
So I have projected in my 5-year model property taxes, going up at 3.5% a year. We do usually outperform that. It's gonna go up probably by a minimum of 2% because everybody's property taxes goes up by 2. As Mr. Lavoie rightly pointed out, as older homes turn over, we get them on the rolls at a higher rate. I tend to budget conservatively. We don't know. I would say that we haven't seen it yet, but it's entirely possible with the higher interest rates, that turnover slows somewhat because it is now more expensive to buy the homes. So that has possibly the home prices will drop slightly from where they were, or they will just slow. So yes, it's very conservative. I could probably boost it up. I will say, I think at this point, we're talking about perhaps by a couple $100,000 a year, but not $2 million a year, which is the deficit we're looking at. So I just want to be clear. Yes, we can boost it a little bit and probably will come in higher, but it's not enough to solve the issue that we see. I'll have to check back, but I do not believe that our investment policy allows us to invest anything past 5 years. So we cannot go out 10, 20, and so on. The investment policy, if anybody is interested in a little light reading, is always included in the budget. It's included in this budget. So we are very, there is a very specific, and it's set by the state, what investments we're allowed. So we could get higher returns. They would be riskier. So we are not allowed to do some of those instruments.
Thank you for that detailed answer, and for your being conservative has served us well. So appreciate that. Okay. Any other comments?
There are no additional public comments, Mayor Dawson.
Okay. With that, I don't think we have further comment or discussion. We're just accepting that for. Oh, there's a resolution at the end of that.
Oh, you don't have to do that resolution until next week when it comes back.
January 22. Okay, for adoption. Thank you for checking though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so actually in comments,
Oh, right.
Councilmember Kwok is the primary liaison for the Environmental Task Force, and I'm the secondary liaison. And as you all know, we passed the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. That ban goes into effect. Well, it's in effect, but it becomes, you can't use them anymore after July 1st. So the Environmental Task Force's last meeting has decided that it's going to devote the next few months to letting people know so that we don't have any problems. So the educational campaign. The Environmental Task Force basically has no budget to do that. So the Environmental Task Force is meeting on Thursday. And so I just want everyone to be prepared that there may be a budget request that comes back from the Environmental Task Force. And I talked to Tracy about that this afternoon.
Okay. So that's something we will be considering on the 22nd then, if you're bringing something back. Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Any other comment? Okay, then on that note, we'll move on to the second part of the council priorities update.
Yeah, so again, this is a review of the city council adopted priorities for 23-24. It's just an update on what we have done, what we did last year, and what we and where we are with each of these priorities. Just as a reminder, we have 4 priorities, which would be wildfire prevention, preparedness, responsiveness, and utility safety, improving pedestrian and traffic safety and multimodal mobility. 3 specific tasks associated with the Mount Diablo corridor and downtown. And number 4, which is develop a fiscal sustainability plan for short and long-term needs. So the staff report outlines what we completed in 2023. And all of the department heads have then updated their parts on what work has been done to date for each of the council priorities. I'm not going to go through those in detail, but I can take any specific questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Okay.
I just have a process question. Are we intending to have a meeting again this year? We usually have one every year. Okay, and so when is that?
I think I had that in, yeah, I think that was in
February.
February or March. The city council meets to set goals and priorities. So we haven't set a date yet, but yes. Probably
Yes.
March, since Carl's not going to be.
Right, and we'll have a new council member.
Correct.
Perhaps, so that would be good. Okay, anybody else with a question? Okay, I did have a question about, just to check in about when, I don't know if so we can answer this, if that's here tonight, but the downtown and Mount Diablo corridor specific plan, we're preparing the scope of work. Is that planned for, is there any particular?
So I think that project has probably been pushed because planning has been concentrated
Right.
almost entirely on the housing element. So
Of course.
that's a nice way of saying we're thinking about preparing the scope of
The,
work.
okay, I was
But we have
okay.
done, I'm just gonna be honest, that
Okay.
got pushed for other priority that we
That's
had
fair.
to do.
And that'll come up when we discuss council priorities again in March. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, if there's no other questions, then we'll see if there's any public comment on this.
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips for persons in the community hall, and I have no hands raised.
Okay, thanks. So I actually just had one comment to make under the first priority. Of course, with it being wildfire prevention, utility safety, I wanted to make sure that we noted that we did add new policy in terms of the utility safety and the safety element. So that was work done on that, which forwarded we have further collaboration. I think that's important to note. Other than that, if there's no more comment, then we can move on to, yeah, we don't need to adopt anything or vote or anything. Okay, we're good there. Thank you, Tracy, for that. Now we will move on to public hearings. And that is the parking meters, and that is also Ms. Robinson.
Okay. So, as we have talked about in the past, the council indicated that they would like to increase the meters hourly rate from $1 to $2 an hour. Right now, the city parking program is sitting in a negative position. There's a couple reasons for that, but primarily COVID really impacted the numbers, and patterns have changed. But the last time we increased meter rates, I believe, was in 2016. So it has been a while. I don't think that sounds right. I thought it was 2006. It's been quite a while. Anyway, it has been a while. So I did want to mention also that I did include in this final budget that there was for half a year or roughly 5 months by the time we would get it implemented, the rates would be $2 an hour. So you'll see that we will slowly be whittling away at that negative balance. I do want to make one correction. It's ordinance 691, not 651. 651 was the old ordinance. So this would be ordinance 691. So we can make that change. I believe the city attorney says that it's okay to make that change at this meeting, so we can still maintain the same schedule. And then just the other thing is that we're pulling out the setting of the times for meters to be set by resolution. We have been asked by the chamber to potentially change our times. Specifically, they wanted us to start later. Instead of starting our meters at 9, they wanted us to start our meters at 10. We really need to evaluate that because we would be losing, I've calculated roughly, if we just did that one change and didn't extend on the other side past 6 p.m., we would be losing $50,000 roughly a year. And the whole point of raising the rates is so that we can sort of pull ourselves out of this hole. So I think we have to consider, if we want to consider changing those times, we may want to consider extending on the other end, potentially, so at least we can come into, so the private lots go from 10 to 8, and they're also at $2. So there may be an advantage of matching with them, because I think that there has in the past been some complaints that there's confusion because those lots are different hours. Although they also go on Sundays, which we would not consider doing. But in any case, that's a long way of saying we pulled it out by resolution, so we wouldn't have to go with the ordinance again just to change those times. So those are the two changes, to the hourly rates and also to be able to set the times by resolution.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from council? Vice Mayor Kwok.
I have a question regarding the rates. We're proposing an increase from $1 to $2 an hour. Do you happen to know what the average rates are for the private parking lots per hour?
I believe they're $2 an hour already.
Okay. Is there a range that some might be 3 or 1, or they're pretty much?
Not the private lots in town. No, I don't believe so.
They're $2. So we would be matching the private lots. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so tonight you were looking for passing of the ordinance, which
You would need to open a public hearing.
we would need to open up. Oh, okay. This is my first one, so
Because we're just introducing the
we're
ordinance
introducing,
tonight.
so how do I open the public hearing? I just opened the public hearing. We are opening the public hearing. Okay.
Mayor Dawson, I have no speaker slips on this item and I have no hands raised in our virtual audience.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, I can close the public hearing. Oh, that was easy. Okay, okay. That's great. So tonight, then, you are looking to introduce the ordinance and then waive the first reading and take public testimony. Okay, for the second reading and adoption. And as far as the time and more analysis of that, that will be a separate meeting that we'll look at and the data. Okay. And on that note, would anyone like to make the motion?
Well, I'll move, we introduce ordinance 691, waive the first reading of the ordinance. We've taken public testimony and we continue it to January 22nd, 2024 for the second reading and adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, movement made to introduce and waive the reading by Councilmember Andori, seconded by Councilmember Geringer. So I will take the roll call vote. Councilmember Andori.
Aye.
Councilmember Candell.
Aye.
Councilmember Geringer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kwok.
Aye.
And I am an aye, so it is unanimous. Bring that back for second reading. Thank you. And now we will move to the items removed from the consent calendar, which is item 12B. And that was the request for allocation of TDA Article 3 funds for Mount Diablo Boulevard crossing enhancement.
Oh,
And
I have a question just about a process.
oh, yes.
Usually we take a break at the 2-hour mark and we're at
Right.
2.5 hours.
Thank you.
Are we?
Yes, why don't
gonna
we do
continue
that?
that practice, or we're
Yes.
changing under the new mayorship?
We should, I apologize, Mike, we just brought you up here, but I think that's a good idea. I would like to continue that. I didn't realize it was 9:30. I was having so much fun up here. So, yes, let's take a 5-minute break and get back at 9:35. Thank you. Thank you, Wei Tai.
Thank you.
Having so much fun opening and
Is 9:36 and we will resume city council meeting. We are on agenda item 16, I think, but really it is 12B. The consent calendar item that was pulled back. So welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for being here.
Good evening, council. Good to see you.
I know we all.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. Councilmember Geringer, you can preface this. Be appreciated.
So on, on item 12B, first of all, Mike, thank you. We received a number of public comments and I wanted to pull it. I think we were asked by residents to pull the item. I wanted to pull it for discussion, not necessarily for the bulleted, points specifically, but wanted to give staff the opportunity to answer some of the questions that were raised. And I don't know if we want to do it in that order, have us ask questions or have public comment on this item before, and then just have all the questions asked at one time. Thinking that might, because I did see a number of people were watching, but.
Okay, maybe, Mike, if you could do as normal, like just a quick overview of the item itself, and then we'll do the normal process and.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So the item is to add a protected crossing at Hampton across Mount Diablo Boulevard. It was an item that was requested originally as a part of a transportation action request. In 2019, I took it to the Transportation and Circulation Commission. This was a popular community requested safety enhancement that they wanted added. We even had a developer that agreed to contribute towards a flashing beacon crossing at that time, but that development has since, gone away. And we've continued to have requests for safety improvements at this location. The same people that want this safety improvement are completely opposed to it if we add any sort of center median. This was on hold for, 4+ years. We didn't go into the design, but as soon as we sort of recalled this design and said, yeah, we really need to reprioritize this crossing, even if we're not going to get that development funding, we need to probably fund this ourselves. We can get some of it from a TDA grant, which is the initial request tonight. Actually asking permission to apply for the TDA grant and a resolution that would go with that and sort of commit to funding this should we get that grant funding. So as we looked into it, it is 5 lanes, 5 vehicle lanes and 2 bike lanes. It's about 77 feet across. We found that we really should include an island median refuge where there's a third PED push button to activate flashing crossings so that anyone taking more time to get across could reactivate it. This is a common design. I'm not saying it's universal, but it is the common design. And as we got into the details and we had hired parametrics to look into this for us, when we got to discussing the crossing and should it have a median, it was an obvious yes. I've pulled out some Federal Highway Administration guidelines. Basically, I've got these cheat sheets from 2018, 2020. They talk about, first of all, this is a safety enhancement. They talk about if you add the pedestrian refuge island, the chances of a pedestrian accident go down from 32 to 56% just by having that. So why wouldn't we do the safest crossing we could do? But sort of the guidelines or the criteria for when you would want one, it says it's highly desirable for either mid-block, which we have in one direction. You're crossing 4 or more lanes, which we are. Your speed limits are 35 miles per hour or greater. We have an 85th percentile, 39 miles per hour at this location. So we meet that as well. And where annual daily average traffic is 9,000 vehicles or higher, we exceed 9,000 vehicles per day as well. So we check every single one of those boxes. To a transportation professional, the only reason you wouldn't build a pedestrian refuge would be if you couldn't, for some geometrical reason. We can here, and in fact, it can be built. It's not a large median. It would be just kind of a bulb out in the front and a taper of maybe 12 to 15 feet in length, and the width of your center median lane, so about 10 feet wide, would be what we would propose for the design. In looking at that with the designer, you can still accommodate all of the turns at this location, in and out of Shell, in and out of the Royal service station, in and out of Hampton. The complaint, which is very valid, is if I make a left turn out of Hampton and I used to turn into the center turn lane where I only had to cross 2 lanes of traffic, and then I could deal with the other westbound traffic and then merge over into them as a separate step. That's a valid complaint. That's not a reason not to build this. You can still make a left turn, and yes, now you've got to cross 3 lanes of traffic. You still could stop in the middle of the intersection, so to speak, and you would have protection in that center turn lane. But you would have to clear the westbound traffic before going out and making that left turn. So if that was really concerning for you and you're coming out of Hampton, you could actually cut back up on Dyer Drive and come out on Willow 1 block to the west and still make that turn and still have that center turn lane available to you. Or if you got stuck there and you felt the traffic was too much to cross, you could turn right and go down and at some point make a U-turn or go a different direction or whatnot. So there are some options available to you, but we do believe we could design this and not cut off access from any location, including parking. There's a beauty salon there with some diagonal parking. All of that should still be accessible, but you would have this center median refuge for the pedestrian.
Thank you for that description. I appreciate that. Are there questions from council?
Go ahead.
Teresa, you raised this.
Oh, okay, Councilmember.
So there were some other options of locations that people were talking about. And do you want to go through
Yes,
maybe
yes.
why they won't work or why they will work?
Yes, just name the other locations.
What's that?
Yes, I'm happy to go through all of them, any or all.
Okay. Great. So the first one was where, okay. Eileen Street. Having a hawk at Eileen versus Hampton.
So Hampton is in the middle. It's
Mhm.
an existing crossing. It's splits Caroline and Brown Avenue, almost equidistant in the middle. So it's like 1,100 and some feet and 1,200 and some feet from either side. Those are your closest signalized intersections. So, about roughly almost a quarter of a mile in each direction. So this splits that so that it's kind of a midpoint, if you will. There's a bus stop at Hampton. It's a county connection.
Not anymore?
It's still there.
Oh, it's still there.
It takes kids to Ocalawanis High School. So it's eastbound one direction and it's westbound just to the east of the Shell in the other direction. So you theoretically, if you have a child utilizing that bus stop, they're crossing there. If you go out and you just stand out there for an hour, you will see people crossing, and they're going to cross not at Eileen, but at Hampton. You're closer to the 7-Eleven, you're closer to the Starbucks, you're closer to whatever else they're going to, but you will see people crossing there. So they're naturally crossing closer to that location than the other, than one street, off, basically.
Got it. I thought I remembered saying that it was on the other side of Hampton. That was,
The bus stop.
no, the, having having this be on the other side of Hampton.
So there is a suggestion. Okay, this
Okay.
crosswalk is currently on the west side of Hampton.
Okay.
You could cross the street and put it on the east side of Hampton. I looked at that. It's not as good. And if you do the center median refuge, which the people that are suggesting it are not considering a center median refuge, they don't want that. Now you are actually impacting access into the Royal service station driveway.
Okay.
With a center median. Also, you already have ramps basically laid out, although they're not ADA compliant at the Hampton location. So you're not completely starting from scratch like you would be if you went to the east side. You're cutting through more stuff.
Okay.
So constructability wise, where it is a better location as well.
Thank you.
So sort of in connection with that, but maybe not. Could you talk about the Hawk system?
So what we're proposing to install right now is a rapid flashing beacon system. However, we would construct it as if it was a Hawk system. And really, and what I mean by that is instead of having singular poles with flashing beacons, we would have mast arm poles because again, we're spanning 77 feet. They would still have the flashing beacons, but a rapid flashing beacon system can be powered by a solar system that we can mount on the pole on the north side of the street with the southern exposure. And that is you're familiar with the yellow flashing beacons. We've added quite a bit, particularly with our safety improvements in your schools lately. They only flash when they get a call. They don't take a lot of power. And if I have a good full southern exposure, I can power them. And they're a yield. And as was pointed out earlier when Matt Luttrop was talking, you push that, and as soon as a pedestrian crosses, even if they continue to flash, vehicles are allowed to progress through the crosswalk and cross the crosswalk. So that's the flashing beacon. A Hawk could be upgraded to, if you get a pedestrian call, it is a flashing red. So it's a stop instead of a yield. Really, the constructability would be the same, but it does have a higher power requirement. It couldn't be controlled with the solar system, at least not your typical one. So the reason for proposing potentially phasing this, if we're not pleased with how the flashing beacon is working, is it could be converted to a Hawk easily should we get a power source. And really, it's changing the flashing bulbs. The cost at the signal would be very inexpensive. The big expense and the time is getting a service pedestal and a power source from PG&E. As you know, the Mount Diablo Court signal took us quite a long time and quite a chunk of money. It could be depending on where they would allow us to draw the power from, even though there is PG&E has a street light across the street. I mean, adjacent to where we put this, but they don't usually give you power from there. You can't just tie into their street lights. They need a location where they're going to get you from a transformer or from a service box. And if it's 2 blocks away, it may cost $50,000 for trenching. If it's closer, it may cost less. Either way, you're looking at 1.5 to 2 years to get through their engineering and their approvals. And then you may recall, even when we were completed with the signal, we still waited months for them to come literally make the power connection. So, so that's the difference between the RRFB, the flashing beacon, and the Hawk is basically a yield, flashing yellow, versus a stop, flashing red. And once you hit a flashing red, even if a pedestrian quickly crosses, you have to wait for that to stop flashing red before you can proceed. So it's not as efficient for the vehicles in some cases.
So, actually, maybe it ends up being 2 questions, but, so this, did go to TransCert, and, they recommended that it come forward. I noticed in the staff report that it talks about having, community engagement if we get the grant,
Correct.
to look at the project's design and sort of other elements. Another thing that was suggested in one of the public comments was to write the grant in a way that was more like a placeholder. Could you talk to how that works in the
So
grant
the grant is
process?
specific. This particular grant is specific. It's, you see the application as part of what you have here. And to get a TDA grant, we either do a show and tell or a presentation of the exact project you're going to build. So that's not an option for this. I am aware that it went to Transcirc and they did come up with, because there was some back and forth on, should we do a median or shouldn't we? I'm just going to say you should do a median, that most every traffic professional would say so. It meets all of the criteria where they highly recommend it. You don't have to, but not only does it meet that criteria, your statistics are telling you it's a safer crossing, and the whole point of this project is to have a safe crossing there. So it is a slight inconvenience for somebody making a left turn out of Hampton. That is, it's a difference. It would be something you would have to learn and you would have to get used to. But just along Mount Diablo Boulevard, there are a lot of places where you have to make a left-hand turn around a center median. It's not an oddity. It would be just different for that location. But most of those other locations don't have crosswalks. And I would just point out where we do have crosswalks with flashing beacons, like a Golden Gate, we do already have a center median refuge. Caltrans has one at Mount Diablo Boulevard, at Pleasant Hill Road, even though it's a fully signalized. It's a standard improvement over not having it. So it really shouldn't be something we're discussing, but obviously some of our community feels so strongly against it that the same people that requested this safer crossing are saying, I don't even want it if you build this. So I would just go along with that and say, yes, they said if we get the grant, we should go back and have a community meeting. But if they mean we should go back, have a community meeting, and then if engineering says we should still add a center median or don't do it, then we shouldn't even get there. If the council wouldn't want us to install the refuge, we shouldn't even seek the grant.
Thank you. And I'll hold for comments after public comment, and maybe another question after.
Two more questions. How big do you think this median will be? Width and depth, right?
Yeah, so it's the center turn lane,
Right.
so it'll cover most of that.
Right.
And the front of it is just going to be a nose, like we have like 6 feet and a semicircle or a half circle, or, a third of a moon.
Is the
kind of
depth,
thing.
right? Is
Yeah.
how long it is. Okay, so
Like
short.
a
It's not
nose.
this
So
like-
it's short in the front, and it has to be because we would design it so that you can make a left turn off of Hampton and swing around the front of it.
Then how much would it extend?
And in the back,
Yeah.
12 to 15 feet.
Why? I think that's part of the questions about this. right?
Yeah.
Can you make that as short as possible?
Well, because you want more mass there, and because you could still, because that's not impacting your turns. It's
Right.
If-
And so
if-
you would minimize it for
so,
the location.
right.
Right.
As opposed to it being 75 feet long.
Right.
And planted median. It would be something that's, let's say 12 feet in depth, almost like and 12 feet in width, because that's the lane width of the center
Right.
turn lane. And it would be some shape that's,
Makes sense.
that's kind of rounded, so that if I'm turning into the service station or the auto shop there, I can basically swing. So it could have a carve out, for example,
Exactly.
for left turns. So it would be designed literally to take into account the turning movements that you would have at that location.
Perfect. So the recommendation is to submit a 410 TDA and a local match of 260. So 260, where do we get that? Is that in our budget? Or are we?
It's not. That
Okay.
would come in our next budget. for
Next year.
25, because the timing of this is, we wouldn't get this grant until the fall of 24. So this wouldn't be put in until 25. So this would come as a formal request with all of our capital program for the balance. However, you do have to consider that as this would count against something else, right? This is, do we want to do the safety project or do we want to surface seal more streets instead?
Any other questions? Did you have a follow-up question? Okay, then let's go to public comment, please.
Mayor Dawson, we have one public speaker, Cheryl McDonald. And if anyone in our virtual audience would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. Thank you.
I haven't done this in 3.5 years. Is it on? Oh, yes, it's on. Can you hear me if it's down like, okay. Thank you. So my name is Cheryl McDonald and I live in that neighborhood. And I'm not so adamant as Mike is presenting. We are definitely a pedestrian safe neighborhood and we have presented this as a TAR because of that. And part of our discussion was that we met with Mike Moran in 2019 and analyzed Hampton Road with 2 other people. And came up with a solution of the Hawk with no median. And the Bobby Freitas actually had a petition that supported a crosswalk with no median. So we didn't find out about any changes to this idea until Monday of the Transportation Circulation meeting. The presenter of the TAR request was not notified ahead of time, and I understand that that is a current policy or unwritten policy, I'm not sure, but history tells me that that has been done. And it was done in this case, and it was also over Christmas time, so we were, in a way, felt a little broadsided, not on purpose and no intention by the city or anybody. It was just, I think maybe it was just the holidays or something. As for Eileen Street is actually, if Bobby Freitas is next to Hampton, then Jiffy Lube is next to Bobby Freitas, and Eileen Street is right across from there. So it's not really as far a distance away from Hampton as was presented. That doesn't mean that that's why we were hoping that it could be, the scope could be expanded a bit, was that it was so close to Hampton. I did watch a video from Caltrans about the Hawk system, and there was a 68% reduction in injuries with the Hawk system, and that includes without a median. I watched videos that had a 5-lane highway in Sacramento, a busy neighborhood that didn't have one. Maybe that's not the custom that's done now, but it was done in Sacramento and it's still there. So we just thought that this could be done without a median. Can we go down Willow? Can we go down Dyer to Willow? We can. That's where the injury that took place that put us in the high entry network. So now we're making a left turn off of Willow where there's no crosswalk, where the injury took place that put us in the high entry network. So it just seems weird that we're being encouraged to go down to Willow to make the left turn there where the incident took place. So that kind of caught us a little off guard as well. Can we make a right and go up to make it U-turns in the middle of the intersection up there? Sure we can. Part of it is that we were caught off guard and there was no public notification in any way for us to understand the difference. Thank you. I guess that was fast 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Are there questions for Cheryl? No, thank you. Okay, let's bring this back then for discussion.
We have a virtual.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hand raised, that's all right. Rob Lavoie.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Hello.
Hi.
A couple of comments on this. I like the idea that our BBS could be switched to a Hawk if that was deemed a better solution. I haven't been in the lighting business for about 30 years, but it seems like the power consumption for like a HID light, the old street lights, is much higher than the current LED lights, which I noticed is what they have in there now. So it seems like maybe there's some potential talking to PG&E and seeing about getting some power if we did want to do the Hawk system. But anyway, it's about 146 feet according to Google Maps between the current sidewalk and where you might do it on Eileen, or maybe another 10 or 15 feet. So it's not that far. I think looking at maybe the east side of shoot Hampton Street still has some merit. I think you could turn into the Shell station either before the crosswalk or after, because it's a pretty wide property there. So that would eliminate the problem of making the left-hand turn that the neighbors are concerned about. I think I had one more comment. They are talking about reducing the speed limit to 30, which eliminates some of the reasons that Mike wants to do the center median as well. And there's many other locations that are just as busy as this, and with a lot more people, that they have a wide street, like the UC Davis Hospital in Sacramento. So I think there's examples of projects that are obviously deemed safe and in a similar situation. So anyway, I think we should look at all the alternatives and work something out that the neighbors are happy with.
Thanks, Rob. Any questions for Rob? No? Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
No additional speakers at this time.
Thank you. Okay, now we will bring it back to discussion. Teresa, did you want to follow up or open up discussion? I don't mean to put you on the spot, so no.
No, no, I didn't have additional questions. So to the not having the public notification and engagement, when the meeting with Transcirc was December
Yeah, it was the middle of December.
18th. And all of our normal notices and everything went out on that. Is it our policy to reach back out to people who or residents who submit TARs? And is that over like a course of time or?
I would say in general, yes, it is. Usually when you're going along with the request, it's not as big a deal. And we knew we had 2 more steps because we're just seeking a grant. So they had that meeting, then we knew we were going to have to come here because in this particular case for this grant request, we need a resolution from the council and your authorization to apply for it and a commitment that we'll build it should we get it. Just like we've done for some of our other projects, we've gotten TDA funding, like the Pleasant Hill Path that we just finished up this last year between Release Valley and Spring Hill. That was a TDA grant project that you approved a resolution for. So we have 2 more public processes before we would, be seeking the grant.
Okay. Gesundheit. Okay, so just to start the discussion, before, and I would say that I'm still supportive of the staff recommendation. I appreciate that the residents sent the emails, and so it did cause us to pull it from the consent item, caused us to ask those questions on behalf of the residents, our constituents. I do think that in looking at it and having cross there before. And having gone through the refuge across Mount Diablo at Pleasant Hill many times after walking from Shangri-La over through the earlier item that we talked about. I appreciate the increased safety of those locations, and I am inclined to support going for the grant. If and that we set expectations that it's going to be submitted the way the scope of the grant, if we're successful. And that, yes, there would be public outreach, but that the idea that it could be completely reworked after we got the grant, I think causes more sort of anxiety and consternation on the part of the public. So if I'm ready to support moving forward with applying for the grant. And then appreciate that the way the design is, it could be phased in to a hawk, one that actually stops traffic. If in fact the analysis, and again, hoping that we can do some meaningful evaluation to determine that it needs to be expanded.
Thank you, Teresa. And would anybody else like to comment? To add to the discussion?
I get that. I think if we do this, when we expand to the Hawk, because I know the original TIR, you were talking with them where it did not have a median in the middle. Would that be more possible with a Hawk versus an RRFB?
No, you'd want the same design.
Okay.
You'd still want that center refuge. As I pointed out, you would even do it where you can, where it's a full activated signal, like Pleasant Hill Road at Mount Diablo Boulevard.
Right. Okay.
You'd still want the refuge. If you have a slower crossing person, it gives them a chance to reactivate the call and have more time to get the rest of the way across the street.
Okay, so I actually am still inclined to go for the safety with a very nice, small little median and nothing, and have, so the mobility, the turning left out of Hampton, I understand that it really is a bummer and that's unfortunate. But it does seem like there's enough people crossing there that this would be safer.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I am of the mind as well. I'm all for improving safety, and the comment is we are looking at reducing speed there, but it's still a higher speed. We were looking at trying to get that down, and this would be a good deterrent. And that being the case, also may make it safer for people who are turning left. So I think it is a good investment, especially as we are looking at more development going on Mount Diablo. We would definitely expect more people to travel and want more people to travel down and traverse safely our streets. So in that case, I will take a roll call. Motion.
Well,
Oh,
I'll make
yes.
the motion,
Gonna
yeah.
call for a motion.
Okay, I move that we, per the staff recommendation, authorize staff to submit a $410,000 TDA Article 3 grant application, including a local match of $260,000 to adopt Resolution 2024-02, approving the request to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for an allocation of TDA Article 3 pedestrian and bicycle project funding for fiscal year 2024-25. 3, adopt a CEQA categorical exemption for the project under section 15301C for the project and authorize staff to file a notice of exemption with the county clerk for the county of Contra Costa.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Okay, roll call vote. Councilmember Anduri.
Aye.
Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Geringer,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Quach,
Aye.
and I am an aye. That passes unanimously. And thank you for the comments and concerns of our residents. And we'll look forward to hopefully that grant being approved. And thank you also for looking for that funding and progressing that forward, even though we'll come to that later. Okay. Thank you. Okay. With that, where are we now? Public hearings, hold on a sec, let's see. We are at council and commission reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to report? Dana-san?
So, I know you're thinking I'm going to have a very long comments, but I want to just say that I'll save my 30-minute plus speech for the next meeting. I do want to share that I do want to share to the community that I'm looking forward to a happy, healthy next chapter of my life with my family in the Pacific Northwest. And in the meantime, I will continue to fulfill my duties and work with my colleagues as an elected member of the Lafayette City Council until January 23rd in the morning. So thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. We also are looking for the next happy and healthy phase of your life. So we'll be with you in spirit. Okay, any other updates? Yes. Go, good. Okay. Vice Mayor Quach, please.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry I couldn't be with all of you in person there today, but this morning I tested positive for COVID. And so as a result, I'm not joining you, but as a result, it's just a reminder that many people are getting sick. We should all be careful that COVID is not really gone and that we can all be susceptible for it. So even myself, I've been very careful, masking on airplanes, all my vaccinations, doing everything, and still it got me. So anyways, hopefully I'll see you in 10 days. But on a second note, the Environmental Task Force in their last meeting in December, as Council Member Ndori just mentioned, they also had a changing of leadership and looking forward into 2024 planning. And they unanimously agreed that to focus on the transition to the electric leaf blower ordinance, to prioritize that, because there's so much work that 7-member body would need to do to get the education and the message out. And really, we want to try to lead by education, and that body has spent a lot of time researching best practices on this. And I have encouraged them to share their many findings on how other communities have been successful at this. And so to ask them to wholeheartedly put this into every month's meeting and just focus 80% of their agenda time and effort on the successful transition to leaf blowers, so that you hopefully will start to see much more communication in the months ahead that will enable our community to embrace the benefits of this change. And as also Councilmember Nduri mentioned, there is pretty much a zero budget entity, and to do some of this effectively, they would benefit obviously from funds to do some of the types of outreach needed to be effective in the communication. So it's something that we hope to bring to you in the next meeting. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Waitai, for the public service announcement and the update. Okay. Susan, did you have an update?
I do. So this is a little bit of a good news, bad news one. So the Lafayette School Bus Transportation Agency, there was a bill passed last year that we can be eligible to get funding from the state. Up to 60% of our funding could come through the state. That's the home to school transportation reimbursement. That's the good news. There's two pieces of bad news that go with that. We are a city and, a community organized JPA. The money from this can't go through a JPA. It has to go directly to the schools. And so we are trying to work with the schools on how to work with them to enable us to get basically $900,000. That would be a huge, great thing, for our bus thing. We were imagining, yay, we're gonna be able to get all this new routes, new everything. Unfortunately, we have to run an RFP with our bus thing, and they're basically estimating that our costs are gonna go up by about $900,000. So it turned into the school districts being very hesitant to go along with this. And we're getting pushback from the school districts that they don't want to do this. But now knowing that we're facing a real problem, we're hoping we'll get a little more cooperation. There is one more possible pathway through, is to try to do this legislatively. And I did reach out to Rebecca with Whitney and I maybe I could get you to chime in as well. Teresa, while you're still here, Councilor Geringer, and if they could modify this bill to add JPAs. And why our particular Assembly Member Rebecca Barraquejan is so important is that they're like one of the only other ones in California happens to be in San Ramon, which is the traffic system, which is also a JPA. So she's got two in her district that would benefit from a legislative fix. And so, so we're doing the dual routes, right? We're going after both. We are also, traffics is supposed to be negotiated. Why we know we're facing such a big increase is that traffics is going through their JPA now, I mean, their RFP now to get a new contract. And theirs went up hugely, and so did others across the Bay Area. But a possibility is if First Student would allow them to continue 1 year down the road, we could try to negotiate together for a larger, a grant, basically go out for funding, and maybe a bigger bus, support system would bid on us. So we're pursuing a lot of things. That's what I wanted to kind of share with you. But those are basically some big things that are unfortunately facing us coming up this year.
Oh, thank you for that. That is like a good news, bad news situation, but a lot of work. So appreciate that and the creativity around it. Any other updates? Carl?
Yeah, I'd like to raise something for possible inclusion on a future agenda. And that is the El Cortola overpass situation. And I'm going to say at the outset here that in this discussion, I'm not going to mention what the causes are of people on the overpass, because frankly, I don't, with one exception, don't know. And I don't think in our discussion we should mention any particular examples, because we need to be totally content neutral in our decision. So, but we've gotten memos from the public. The public doesn't understand why the city can't do something about the situation. We had the Highway Patrol and the Caltrans people come to us at one meeting. I thought that was fairly unsatisfactory. What really spurred me this time was the letter that we received from the person who is on the bridge, part of one of the people on the bridge, who basically said that as a result of their being on the bridge, a car stopped on the freeway and blocked traffic so the person could shout at us, and a car pulled over by the side of the road underneath our vigil and appeared to be watching us. So we've got people who are on the bridge who are recognizing it's not safe, but the Highway Patrol won't recognize that it's not safe. It's just a ridiculous situation. So I'm wondering if we should discuss going to BBK or going to Townsend, or Townsend and BBK together, to see if there is some sort of lobbying, who we should talk to get some action on this, because the current situation is just not satisfactory. That bridge should not be seen as the place where people can go and, wave flags, whether or not they attach them to the side. They should, it's a distraction, and it shouldn't be happening in Lafayette. So no matter what the cause is. So I don't know, I'd like to put that on the agenda for a future meeting to discuss.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. It's a good idea. be more proactive as opposed to, you know, what we can do. Okay, I only have one thing to add, that Vice Mayor Kwok and I are still in the midst of interviews for the Code Enforcement Appeals Board. And we'll finish interviews and hope to have recommendations for council the next meeting. We'll see how the scheduling goes. But that did come up in terms of the leaf blower ordinance, that there was an education issue around that, and enforcement and appeals on that. So there's another avenue maybe you can think about in terms of how you might look at funding or supporting funding for that. Because that'll be important. We obviously want education to be the lead, not enforcement or appeals. So just a thought. And with that, if there's no more updates, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is 17B. Councilmember Andorian Geringer, the representative to the Contra Costa County Advisory Council on Aging.
Sure. All right. So we interviewed Richard Mariski, who's applied to be Lafayette's representative on the Contra Costa Board of or the Contra Costa Advisory Council on Aging. And basically, we recommend him for that position. It will be the County Board of Supervisors that makes the final appointment. He would serve on that advisory council, and he would liaise with our Senior Services Commission. So he most likely will attend the meetings of both groups and carry information back and forth. So it's a good situation.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't, do we need a motion for that? Okay, so I move that the City Council recommend Richard Mariski to the Board of Supervisors to be Lafayette's representative on the Contra Costa Advisory Council on Aging.
And I'll second.
Thank you. Do we need public comment on this? We do. Okay, is there any public comment?
There are no speaker slips and there are no hands raised for this item, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, there is a motion and a second, so I'll take a vote. Councilmember Andori?
Aye.
Councilmember Candell? Aye. Councilmember Geringer?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kwok?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And thank you to Richard for applying. And with that is item 18A, the resignation from Carol Reef, the Public Art Committee member. So we do accept that with regret. Carol brings wonderful experience, professionalism to PAC and everything she does for the community. So we will regretfully accept her resignation. And that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
could I ask that we adjourn in memory of Avas Mughal, who was a member of the Art Theater Trust Board of Directors, who passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in December. Very, very sad situation. So if we could adjourn in his memory, that would be nice.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you, Councilmember Anduri, and sympathies with his family. Okay, well, thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned. Yay.